Hello, climate leaders. We'll get started in just a few minutes. If everyone could make their ways to their seats, we'll see you in just a few minutes. Good morning. Welcome, welcome. Everyone, if you can make your way in and move up, that would be lovely. We're about to get started.
Well, welcome back to our second day of the American Climate Leadership Summit. We are so thrilled to be here with all of you in this beautiful morning.
Yesterday was amazing. We really got to hear from one and after another of amazing speakers, and at the end of the day, we heard from all of you. And that was really important for us, for the movement, and we want to keep that momentum going. The ideas that were generated yesterday in the working sessions really helped us understand that climate leadership comes from within. It resides in all of us, and it's really about the impact that we can make together, individually and together.
Yesterday, the day flew by. It was just amazing. So much information, so much inspiration from many speakers, and of course, from all of you, from your ideas. And today, we're going to hear also from amazing speaker, and we're going to take the discussion even farther. We're going to talk to health, local and faith community leaders that are going to tell us how the climate crisis is impacting them and what they are doing to lead by example.
Absolutely. So welcome again. I also want to welcome the folks on the live stream. We will be live streaming again today. If you know anyone that wasn't able to make it, they can watch it on YouTube. I also want to thank our partners. We had several wonderful hosts that helped us that worked together. We all worked together to bring this event to you, the hosts were really very helpful, both intellectually and financially, in making this day and yesterday happen. Also, such a wide variety of partners. We just love to see how many faith and health organizations that are on this partner list that really help to shape the flow of our 2 days.
And it's important that you know that, again, this conference, it's for you. So we definitely want to hear your ideas. Today we're going to be joined by amazing, inspiring speakers. And we're going to get a lot of information. But at the end of the day, during our lunch, we're going to do a working session kind of like the one that we did yesterday. But you're going to be paired with people from your communities, from your areas, and it's going to be very interesting.
Wonderful. So, I think we'll get started. Yeah. We're going to do something a little bit different today. Yesterday we did an opening prayer. Today we're going to be doing an opening visualization. And I think what we're hoping that is that really centers us in our work of the day and as we carry ourselves through the working session. So here to guide us through the visualization is Shanta Reddy Alonso. She's the Executive Director for Creation Justice Ministries and a member of the Blessed Tomorrow Leadership Circle. And her organization really supports faith denominations in their work to care for creation and advocate for solutions. So, Shanta, please join us.
Good morning. I invite us to begin by centering ourselves. And if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can shut them at this time. Or as an alternative, just relax your gaze and let it stay on an inanimate object nearby. Some of you may be comfortable with meditations and visualizations. For some of you, this might be new. Just keep an open mind. We're going to take a few minutes to journey inside the mind. Each of us came to the American Climate Leadership Summit because we are leaders, and thus we have long to-do lists of chores and work. So I invite you to give yourself the gift of being fully present today. Pick up your concerns from home, from your job, put them in a box under your chair. Can you see the box? Just put those items in there and tuck it away under your chair. Don't worry, they'll be there for you later to retrieve and attend to later today. Now I invite you to reflect on some of the important reasons why we're all here. Think of a young person who you deeply care about. It could be a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, a godchild, a friend, a a student, a mentee, a neighbor. Do you have that person in mind? As this person becomes more in focus in your mind, remember some details about them. Replay some of the good times you've spent with them, which highlight what makes them so special to you. Maybe you see their smile, or you remember a day you received insight into this young person's way of seeing the world. Maybe you shared a moment of solemnity or deep meaning. In 30 years, what are your hopes for the life you want your young loved one to lead? What might their home be like? How will they choose to invest their time? What are they passionate about? What do they hold sacred? Who might they count among their loved ones? Think about how old they will be 30 years from now. Now picture your loved one in that future setting. Your loved one is telling a story about you and your influence on their life. What is your loved one saying about your life work and the impact you had on them? Is there something about the example you're setting today which you hope your loved one will emulate in years to come? When you're ready, I invite you to travel back to the present with me now. But hold your loved one close to the center of your attention. In climate work, we often say that our actions today will have a profound impact on future generations. But today we reflected on just one person who we love. This work is personal, and we can never forget that. I invite you to dedicate your activities today to your loved one's future. And remember that box we wrapped up and stuck under your chair at the beginning? If you can, try to keep it closed for a while. Give yourself the gift of being present today. Let's try to bring our full intellectual, emotional, and spiritual attention here if we can. At this point, I'm going to invite you all to speak aloud, breaking the silence by saying the name of the young person to whom each of us dedicates this day. And when I count to 3, please speak that person's name out loud. 1, 2, 3. Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, what a beautiful way to start our day. Thank you so much, Shanta. And now I would like to welcome to the stage the president and founder of ECO America, Mr. Bob Berkowitz. He's going to introduce our keynote speaker.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Come on down. The senator's going to come out in just a second, so come on down. We'll just pause for a moment. You grab yourself a seat. That would be just great. It's time to wake up. We'll get into that in a moment. I want to thank you all for yesterday. I really learned a lot. I thought it was a great day yesterday, and this is the first time we've done an open conference. They've all been closed, and we've had a lot of people, and I think more diversity, more voices, more interesting things yesterday, and look forward to incorporating all that into where we go forward. I'm here to right now introduce a personal hero of mine, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. He was a state's attorney and then an attorney general for the state before becoming the senator in 2007. He is the most prominent voice on climate change in the U.S. Senate. For many of the senators, climate change is an issue, and they know about it and they care about it. For him, it is the issue. He is really the focus of wisdom and focus on the issue, and through his weekly It's Time to Wake Up speeches that he does on the floor of Congress. So he's just spectacular. He leads in front of the scenes and he leads behind the scenes in so many different ways that we'll never even know about to try to get this nation, to get us and the U.S. to climate solutions, especially in the next few years. So I just want to welcome Sheldon to the stage, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob, and good morning, everybody. How are you? It is great to be with you. Oh, enough. Thank you. It is wonderful to be with you. As Bob said, I'm Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. I represent Rhode Island in the U.S. Senate, and that makes me an inhabitant of the Washington, D.C. political ecosystem. It is a habitat that I have spent now 12 years in. And my job this morning is to give you the field report on climate change of what is going on in that habitat. Because it is not exactly what you think. I bet that there are a great number of you who, if I asked, is the heart of the climate problem in Washington partisanship, you'd put your hands up and say yes. But that's not actually true. I know that for two reasons. I know that because of the private conversations that I have with Republican colleagues who want a solution to climate change and are embarrassed at the position of their party, but who don't feel that they have a safe place to, if you want to say, come out on climate without suffering enormous political retribution. So the will and the understanding among many of my colleagues, it's actually there. And if you don't trust my experience, you can actually go and look at some more objective data. A timeline. I came to the Senate and was sworn in January of 2007. And in 2007, and in 2008, and in 2009, over and over again, I saw bipartisanship on climate change. I think there were 5, if I count right, bipartisan climate bills, big ones. There were bipartisan climate hearings. There were bipartisan climate conversations. So we've actually had the experience of bipartisanship on climate. Something happened in January of 2010 that stopped that bipartisanship like a heart attack. And since then, we've been like in an EKG flatline in which the bipartisanship has died. What happened in January of 2010 that changed this? Citizens United. The Supreme Court, I think at the request of the fossil fuel industry and with the fossil fuels industry's expectation that they would get a win on this, said big special interests can now spend unlimited amounts of money in American politics. And they went to work like that, the fossil fuel industry did. Nobody's taken advantage of Citizens United more than the fossil fuel industry. Like that. And their political weaponry went from muskets to artillery. And they figured out right away how they could hide that it was them, so they could run that spending through dark money channels. So now you get these cockamamie groups with names like Americans for Peace and Puppies and Prosperity that show up to tell you that the person that you were thinking of voting for is a complete rat, hates jobs, hates America, and hates peace and puppies and prosperity. And you don't know who's behind it. But 9 times out of 10, I will bet you it is the fossil fuel industry who's behind all that nonsense. If you doubt the power of this group, ask a former congressman named Bob Inglis, an extremely conservative Republican congressman who had a bit of an epiphany and also was provoked by his children to understand that actually the science is legit on this, and we really have huge stakes, and we've got to do something about it. And he was immediately cratered by the kind of numbers that it usually takes an indictment to produce in my line of work in his next primary. So what Citizens United did was 3 things. It did the thing that it obviously did, which is to allow huge special interests to spend unlimited amounts of money in politics. It did what it said it wasn't going to do, but in fact actually did, which is allow enormous amounts of that money to be spent anonymously behind these shell corporations, front groups, donor-advised trusts, 501c4s. There's a whole apparatus of obscuring whose hand it is that operates now. So not only was it unlimited money, it became unlimited dark money. And then the third piece is, and this is pretty logical, if the law allows you to do something, like spend unlimited money, spend unlimited dark money, what else does it naturally, necessarily, logically, inevitably allow you to do? It allows you to threaten to do that thing that you can do, to threaten or promise to do that thing. And of course, the great thing about succeeding at getting your way politically with that threat or that promise is you don't even have to spend the money. So you very rarely actually see the ad that says, we're ExxonMobil, we're mad as hell at Sheldon Whitehouse because he's always in our face, vote against the little son of a gun. You more likely see the dark money Americans for Peace and Puppies and Prosperity saying Sheldon Whitehouse is a rat who hates Americans and peace and puppies and prosperity. But at least you see that. And it's weird, and it's creepy, and it's not attributable, but it's there. And from time to time, clever researchers, persistent journalists, and very clever investigative workers can figure out who's behind that. But that threat, that promise, that never shows up on any radar screen. But you put that array of weaponry together, and then they did something very clever, these guys. They focused it entirely on the Republican Party. They said, we are going to take over this party. We are going to extinguish in this party any bipartisanship on climate change. Saved them a lot of trouble, because they were going to have a lot of trouble with Democrats likely anyway. It also masked what is going on as partisanship. It masks what is going on as partisanship, because it looks that way until you look under the hood. In fact, what it is the oldest game in politics. The Roman Senate, I'm sure, had people standing outside offering emoluments and bribes and political support and jobs for the idiot nephew and whatever else it is that is the currency of legislative manipulation. This has gone on forever. That's what this is. They just directed it at one half of our political system. So that's the problem. And that means there is a solution, because much of what they're doing comes through 4 groups. It comes through Americans for Prosperity, which is the Koch brothers front group. I don't think we can do a lot about them. The Koch brothers are pretty determined about this stuff, and they are a fossil fuel industry. They are the refiners and the transporters and the manufacturers. They're a big threat. Then there's the American Petroleum Institute, which, as you know by its name, is not going to get very far from the fossil fuel industry. But two others are kind of weird. One is the National Association of Manufacturers. Why would the National Association of Manufacturers be so resolutely anti-climate action when so much of the construction of our new clean energy economy is going to be manufacturing? They're not very clear about their funding, but I think it's pretty clear that there's a fossil fuel interest behind it. And then the big one, the biggest dark money spender of them all, the most powerful lobby group in Washington, D.C., the brute in my ecosystem, is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is my most inveterate enemy in getting anything done on climate change. Elizabeth Warren and I did a study a few years ago and compared the policies of their board members to their policy. There's not much overlap. Their board members are actually pretty good on climate, so weirdly, why is it that they're not representing their board members? Why are they such wild deniers and obstructors? Again, they don't reveal their funding. But I suspect that the fossil fuel industry has just poured immense amounts of money into the U.S. Chamber, allowed them to become the political powerhouse that they are, but the price of that is climate denial and obstruction. That's the problem, and the solution is make them change. It ought to be unacceptable for an American corporation to support either of those two entities, to be a board member of either of those two entities while they continue to deny and obstruct. And if we can keep that pressure on, one of my examples is Coke and Pepsi, who are two wonderful companies who do great stuff on climate inside their precincts, who do great stuff trying to push climate sensitivity out their supply chains, but whose trade group, the American Beverage Association, sends money every year to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And because the good guys almost never show up in my universe, literally they almost never show up. And when they show up, it is a Wheatie flake of an effort against the monstrous beast that the fossil fuel industry presents in my world. So there's room to maneuver. There's no reason that Coke and Pepsi should be supporting their adversary on this issue. And it means that their net presence in my world is hostile to climate action because their political presence is so weak in Congress on this issue, and the Chamber's presence is so strong. If you did a balancing test just with those two companies, they're being opposed by their face in Congress. Doesn't make sense. So corporate America, we as a country can make it socially and commercially unacceptable to belong to these climate denier organizations. And I'll tell you what, it is starting to work. I'll close with this. They're starting to feel the pressure. Just the other day, the head of the Chamber of Commerce did a scripted interview with a reporter to say that they're not going to be so mean and partisan anymore. Right. Just happens to coincide with the House moving into Democratic hands. They've also quietly changed their website so that their web statement on climate is less noxious and slightly more credible than it used to be. And they've also supported some little tiny tidbits of climate-related legislation like my Use It bill and like the carbon capture bill. But when it comes to the big question, can we put a price on carbon, which I think is the only way we fix this, they're not there. There's a lot of phony baloney. So we need to put pressure on the companies who support these organizations to get them to knock it off. And we need to be able to poke through the phony baloney and make sure that the support is for real. We can't be like the fossil fuel industry, which has CEOs saying, I know my product causes climate change. I know that we've got to solve this, and I support a price on carbon, and at the same time they have their entire political operation out there saying, don't you dare do what he said, because we will kill you if you do. There is a huge discrepancy, and we can't let that propagate out of these other places. We've got to make sure not only that these organizations turn towards meeting the climate demand we have right now, but that they do so sincerely and that they are actually producing results. Don't let yourself be greenwashed. This is a little bit of a kind of a weird scenario I know that I've painted for you, but I think it allows us the chance to have a strategy to change this. And I know in my heart that if my Republican colleagues woke up one day and the Chamber of Commerce was sincerely saying, okay, boys, game's over. We're really into actually getting something done now. Let's sit down and have a real conversation about what makes this work, measured against a 1.5 or a 2 degree scenario goal. That would change everything in Washington. I'm from New England. The snow piles up on our roof, flake by flake, storm by storm, over the winter. That could happen. Winter is coming. Storm by storm over the winter. And then in the spring, what happens? One day, whoomph, all the snow comes off the roof. That's the change that's going to happen because the barriers are artificial. And all we need to do is push and make that happen. And we can do that. Thank you very, very much for being here and for your support.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Cannot thank him enough for his leadership, and we need more of him in office. So we want to thank Senator Whitehouse for joining us this morning. We're going right into our plenaries. We have 3 plenaries today. The first one is going to be about health, breakthroughs in health. And here to introduce the session is Layla McCurdy. Layla is the chair of EcoAmerica's Climate for Health Leadership Circle and senior advisor for the program. Welcome, Layla.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to say a few words, but I have to say I'm not so sure that I'm delighted about following Senator Whitehead. I'll try my best. I'm a different category, so please think from that perspective. Again, good morning, and thank you so much for being here at this Leadership Summit. We are all here because we are looking for ways to engage in breakthrough solutions for climate change, which is, of course, is the greatest public health threat of our time. We as climate leaders understand that addressing climate change will improve health overall, especially for the most vulnerable, and will lead to health equity. And we can use our trusted voices to promote health, justice, and equity through climate solutions. And that's exactly what the Climate for Health initiative is striving for. Climate for Health is a national initiative led by a diverse network of health leaders from across the health sector. We offer tools and resources to health leaders to inspire and empower them to take action for climate solutions in order to build public support and political will for urgent climate action. We have an outstanding leadership circle. It's a group of 40 individuals representing 26 organizations, and we have a wider network of health partners. And many of you are here today, and I want to thank you for your continued leadership and support. And these are some of the logos that we were able to fit in one slide to recognize our amazing partners. So with the help of our leaders and partners, we continue to make progress and refine our strategy for effective solutions. Last spring, at our annual National Climate and Health Leadership Forum, we reaffirmed our priorities as visible climate leadership, mitigation, advocacy, collaboration, and collective action. And collectively, we agreed that health professionals are trusted messengers on climate change, and we need to use our voice. There is a need for national health agenda on climate change that health professionals can support. And we expressed our desire to build an inclusive health movement on climate solutions that addresses climate and environmental justice. And we have seen significant momentum building towards these concepts over the year. As you know, in the fall, we saw a sea change with the release of several reports, including the NCA4, IPCC report, that once more added to the scientific evidence of something we are already seeing and feeling, the impact of climate change on our communities. And health groups are rising up. For example, and again, this is a mixture of various things that we put together to give you a glimpse of what's going on in the field, and a lot of them are familiar to you. But I wanted to point out to the example of the global health call, the Global Health Call to Action, which was released last October at the Global Climate Action Summit. It was endorsed by over 100 organizations representing 6 million health professionals in over 125 countries. We, Climate for Health at ECHO America, as well as many of our partners, are signatories to that. Again, this is just one example of a large group of activities undertaken by the health community. And unfortunately, as I said, this slide captures only a few of the amazing work that our partners are doing. Because of time limitations, I'm not going to be able to recognize all that amazing, outstanding work, but I want to extend my heartfelt thank yous for all the work that's going on out there. I also want to highlight just a couple of upcoming key Climate for Health partnership activities. We are planning to provide the Climate for Health ambassadors trainings at national partner conferences, including the American College of Sports Medicine later this month. Hopefully some of you will be there. And immediately following that, at the National Environmental Health Association's annual meeting in July. So again, any information you would like to have about these conferences, any interest from your local partners that may want to participate in these, just let us know. We are also planning to host a regional training with Physicians for Social Responsibility, and we also are talking to many of our partners for additional trainings, as well as we will be doing this training virtually with, hopefully with many of you, so that we can have climate ambassadors from the health community out there doing the great work that many of you are already doing. Also, later this year, we will be releasing our Moving Forward Guide to help the sector move towards 100% clean energy. You will be hearing from us about this, and we will be reaching out to you, some of you, if you're interested, to review it as peer reviewers, and then of course a wider community we will be asking for your help to engage in the distribution and implementation of this Moving Forward Guide, and looking forward to working with all of you on that. With all of these things going on, there's great opportunity for all of us to collaborate, and a breakthrough will take all of us, and we look forward to working with all of you to achieve that. Thank you so much for your commitment and leadership. Next, you will hear a moderated discussion from an outstanding panel of climate, health, and justice leaders. Now it's my honor to invite the panel up here and introduce one of the nation's most influential physician leaders who will be moderating the session, Dr. Benjamin. And the panel, please. I'll take a few words and introduce you. You need no introduction.
You don't need
but
introduction.
I will.
I'm good.
You're keeping
Yeah, I'm
me
good.
up?
Yeah.
But
George,
but can I at least
be my guest.
thank you for serving on the Echo America board, for all your leadership, not only as a board member, but also your, American Public Health Association's tremendous great work and partnership with Echo America and Climate for Health under your leadership.
Thank you, Lolly.
Thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let me just thank you very much for allowing us to be here. And I'm going to do a couple things. APHA has been playing in this space of climate change for over 2 decades, specifically. And, we just announced last fall that we were rolling out a new climate, health, and equity center. 3 key words: climate, health, and equity, as part of our efforts. And one of those efforts I just wanted to share with you is that we're going to be having our Speak for Health, which is our new advocacy campaign, in July with a focus on climate change. And this is part of our effort to try to build the youth, young folks that are involved in public health practice and get them in climate change. So they're going to spend a day basically learning both how to advocate and learning more about climate change. And then we're going to take them to the Hill so they can practice the craft and skills that they just learned. This center is an important center. This is one of the areas in which we're supporting. You can see we are also going to provide a few scholarships for people in that center. So I just wanted to use this time just for that first commercial announcement. I think next, what I just want to say is, quite frankly, that the science is clear, that climate change is here today, and it's impacting our health today, and is preventable. And I think if you leave this with no other messages today, from my perspective, is to understand that this is not an issue for the future, that this is an issue of the impact of the health and well-being of our population today. I think saving the polar bears is wonderful, and I'm all for saving the polar bears. I'm all for reducing the amount of ice that's melting around the world. But I'm hoping that we will still be here and still have the opportunity to enjoy the ice and enjoy the polar bears. But as we think about climate change, it's very important to understand that some of the mitigation and adaptation things that we're doing certainly have a co-benefit for health. But the real truth of that is, it's all about our health, okay? That health is not a secondary issue here. It is a primary issue. So to have a discussion around this, I have 3 just amazing people. I have Dr. Gail Christopher, who's currently the president and founder of the NTNU Center for Healing in Nature. She's the chair of the board of the Trust for America's Health, and prior to that was a senior advisor and vice president at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Next to her is Alonzo Plow. Alonzo is a long-term public health practitioner and is currently the chief science officer and vice president for research, evaluation, and learning at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And then we have Dr. David Jizak, who also has over 30 years of practice in public health. He's the executive director of the National Environmental Health Association. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask each one of them to give us a short opening statement, and then we want to have a conversation. And you're welcome to do it from there if you want, or you can come up here.
Good morning. I'm honored to have been invited to join this panel. Most of my work over the last, 30 plus years has been focused on health equity and ultimately addressing the fundamental undergirding belief that has allowed us to create the inequities and to sustain them. And I believe that that is the notion of a hierarchy of human value, the notion of racism, and all the other isms that it opens the door for. So it was kind of an aha moment for me when I realized that there was such an intersection between the work to overcome the belief in a hierarchy of human value and the work of moving our country to be more active and more engaged and to really get a hold of this threat of climate change. And the intersection is amazing because most of the frontline communities, most of the people who are really suffering from the immediate changes in climate, they are disproportionately communities of color. And they suffer disproportionately in terms of the burden that they bear. Whether it's the coastal communities down there in the South or in the Northwest, or even some of the flooding in the Midwest, communities that are low income and communities of color bear a disproportionate burden today for the effects of climate change. And so part of what we have to do to mobilize the advocacy and the activism is to come together as one community and to jettison our belief that some people have more value and more worth than others. Now, this issue of the health consequences, like Dr. Benjamin, I'd like you to take one concept home with you today and really live with it, and that is that we are spending $3 trillion annually on chronic disease. $3 trillion. I would say quickly that I think we've been a little too abstract in our framing of this challenge, and we've asked people to care about the planet when we know they care about their pockets a lot more. And so I think what we have to do is create a more robust business case for mobilizing. And that business case has at its heart the health consequences of climate change. If we do the numbers in terms of the asthma and the chronic diseases and the stress-related diseases and the mental health consequences of being exposed to disaster, we will come up with a scale of costs that will make sense to the greatest skeptics. So they've asked us to make our opening remarks brief, and I'm going to honor that request. But I would suggest to you that the biological, physiological links between the stress of climate change and vulnerability to chronic disease, those links are clearly established in the literature. And we need to be more robust in our framing of this issue as a health issue which is costing our nation far too much. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. You're going to hear a lot of common themes, I think, in our presentation today. I'm speaking today from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, but as I like to say when I give these talks, I'm a relatively short-time philanthropist of a few years, 5 or 6 years, and a long-time community health, local public health practitioner. So my remarks are certainly going to talk about what we as a sector are trying to do, but they really draw on my 35 years of working at the front lines of public health and seeing this issue manifested in the kind of chronic disease disparities that Gail just talked about for the entirety of my public health practice. So at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, I mean, we are working to build what we talk about and call a culture of health, where everybody in America has a fair and just opportunity for health and well-being. And we know we can't do that if we don't address emerging and known facts that are threats to health. And climate change is one of those threats. It is a major threat to health and well-being. As Dr. Benjamin's slide showed, it affects many known health conditions, but we need far more awareness to understand this pervasive influence of climate change on health. And if we don't address that, we are just not going to have the kind of healthy future that we need for the generations to come. And it also requires a different framing of health. Often people think about health and they think about the way our default $3 trillion a year system deals with this, with its illness care in hospitals, which are important. But when we are talking about climate change in health, we're talking about community health, we're talking about large disparities in health outcomes based on this, and something that we need to address collectively, cross-sectorally, as a nation. I'm just going to reinforce a little bit what Gail talked about. Climate change magnifies these inequities, these health inequities that prevent people from having equal chances. Climate change exacerbates the health disparities based on race, class, income, other marginalizing factors that don't allow people to have the best health that they should have. And we need to understand that addressing climate change is an absolutely critical way to address health inequities and build health equities and increase that awareness throughout the country. Because again, whenever we see a climate change-related disaster, we see a disproportionate impact on low-income communities, communities of color, tribal communities, again, which exacerbates existing health inequalities that those communities face every day. I think that what I emphasize is I think there's a growing awareness of this. We're pleased to sponsor an issue of the American Journal of Public Health that's going to highlight this. The foundation is spending a significant amount of time to raise this issue as a critical issue, along with many of our other partners in philanthropy. And there are solutions to this, and we want to lift up that. I'll kind of close with talking a bit about what we're trying to do now and what we're calling our Health and Climate Solutions Program. We're funding a number of communities, urban and rural, around the country to understand what kind of community-based collaborative strategies are really working. How can we bring the environmental justice community into this movement building to improve our awareness around health and climate more than we have done? And our hope is that we can lift up and unearth these ongoing collaborative strategies that are making a difference and extend this conversation about the importance of working on climate and health. A couple other things I want to leave you with that we're working on is that we're working very closely with the National Academies of Science around the Gulf Research Program and a particularly hard-hit area on the weather impacts of climate. We are working for a long-term strategy with them to improve community resilience and community engagement in a preventive approach to building resilience and climate resilience in the South and Southeast. So I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
David.
Folks, I hope it's okay if I remain seated. I wanted you the opportunity to check out my cool socks, and I can't do that if I'm standing behind the podium. I would like to begin by sharing with you a story that clings to me like a leech. It was in the mid-90s, and I was giving a lecture in a lecture hall just like this to first and second year medical students. It was on environmental health. And I talked about perchlorate in drinking water, which was a problem right there on campus. I talked about lead-based paint, which was poisoning Hispanic children literally within walking distance of the lecture hall. I described air pollution in the Southern California area of the Inland Empire, which competes with Houston for the worst air quality in the country. And I ended by pointing to the ceiling and saying, the ceiling in this room is 3 to 5% chrysotile, which is a type of asbestos. And in a place where there are earthquakes, you ought to think about this, you young medical students who want to become physicians. And I felt I gave a presentation that resonated with every single person. No one was flying paper airplanes. There were no cell phones at that point in time. I had everyone's attention. And then I did the thing that most professors dread. Are there any questions? And for any of you that come from the clinical professions, you know what the single question was. What's on the test? That, my friends, was the single question. So number one, I believe that if we want to have breakthroughs in health, credentials in medicine, in dentistry, in public health, in nursing, need to include climate and health criteria built into them. That's my first belief. My second belief is that we should not confuse expertise and leadership. Those are two different things. Thank you. We should focus on the principles of influence, how to work with human beings that are influencers and to get them to come around to our reasonable kind of expectations. Affect heuristics. Why do people think the way they think when they draw their opinions? Think about measles and think about affect heuristics. And then number three, we need to play well on teams that we don't lead. Okay? We need to be good followers as well as good leaders. There's a lot of focus on dynamic leadership. Let's be dynamic followers. And frankly, there's a lot of great stuff out there by citizen scientists. We should join their party, right? We may have the credentials, but there's really good stuff, and if I had another 3 minutes, I would describe it. Number three, my third belief is that we need to change ourselves before we ask other people to change. NEHA as an organization is committed to decoupling itself from fossil fuels. We're looking at conferences like this where we can have carbon offsets. All of our meetings, which have 1,000 to 1,500 people, are walkable. We have made the conference paperless. We secure food from local farmers so that they benefit from our presence. We have meatless options, and we're avoiding hotels that have single-use plastic soap and shampoo containers. All little things, but we have state affiliates all across the country, and they are paying attention. And they too want to do what the mothership is doing. So I'll close by saying NEHA as an organization does not desire to mirror the state of the profession, the environmental health profession across this country. We want to mold and shape and form it so that it is more productive, more useful, and more reasonable in the future. Thanks, Dr. B.
Thank you. So I thought I would put you on the spot about a learning that I had when I was a local health officer here in Washington, D.C., where I learned very painfully that there is a political structure in the city that's elected, and another political structure in this town that is the business community, but that the real political structure in this town was Mrs. Jones in Ward 7 and Uncle John in Ward 8, who were the power brokers in those communities, that if I wanted to get anything done as the health official in this town, I had to go break bread with Ms. Jones, because Ms. Jones knew everybody in the community and she could mobilize the community. Or, Reverend Foster, who, through his congregation, was able to mobilize many, many folks, and in fact had a larger health ministry than the health department. So how through your experiences have we really worked very hard to engage the true power brokers in communities? Because we always have this discussion about what the power dynamics really are. They're in those communities. How do we engage them in an effective way around this issue of climate change?
So if I could speak on behalf of the environmental health profession, it is perhaps the one public health profession that spends most of its time in the community, working with the regulated community, working with daycare, working with elementary schools, looking at antibiotic resistance issues in hospitals. I believe my profession has not been as savvy or disciplined around working with community members as much as we have the regulated community. And this is something we'll be encouraging our members to do on a more systematic basis. About 1/3 of our members come from the private sector. And Dr. Benjamin, we're trying to determine how best to engage them more effectively so that they can echo the kinds of messages that we would like to get across to our community. And they know their communities well. There's a lot we can learn from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the answer to this question is to be found in the history and the current engagement of the environmental justice community. We tend to think in a future focus when we talk about climate, but the severe weather issues are not future, they're current. And the environmental justice community has been mobilized, I guess it's now about 40 years, I think, or more, helping communities to cope with the consequences of severe weather issues and climate issues and failing infrastructure, as you pointed out, in so many levels. So I think you have people who are affected directly by the challenges and whose inner drive is to survive and to thrive in spite of that. So this environmental justice movement has to intersect with the more traditional environmental health and climate change movement to bring, I think, the felt urgency, the imperative for action now. We don't have the luxury anymore of thinking of this in a dichotomous way. You know, these communities are suffering today, and the cost of that suffering is today. And so bringing together those who are feeling it right now today to help expand the circle of mobilization and if necessary, lobbyists and activism to do the broader changes. So I think you have to bring all of these different strands together.
Alonzo.
Yeah, I mean, in public health, anything that we really did that mobilized a great change and awareness happened at a community level. Those, whether it was AIDS, HIV, all of the big systemic challenges that we have been successful in have started with that kind of movement building. When we discount lived experience in our analysis of how to solve a problem, we aren't going to get at the problem. And I will just echo the importance of the environmental justice community has been linking lived experience, inequity, a political economic frame, and an organizing frame to dealing with climate issues and inequitable issues around environmental exposures. David, you mentioned citizen science. All of these are the elements to bring people in communities who experience these problems and have all kinds of insights at the level about what it takes to address these problems and also become a political base for broader systems change. It's totally essential, a major part of the kind of movement building and change we want to make.
How do we help them connect? You know, part of our challenge is here, of course, helping people make that connection between what's happening today with the climate and their health. Lots of other factors involved as well, but how do we help them make that connection?
The program that we're doing, we're using this window of extreme weather events, and you talked about it too. And everyone in the room knows those manifest themselves in different ways. We did some work with some communities in Miami, and that's, the sea level rise is palpable. I mentioned the work on the Gulf. That extreme weather event is a good window for them to see it in their lived experience and the impact of climate and health, a little bit more than sometimes the abstractions in which we talk about it. So we are in a communication strategy that we're trying to use. We think that the window of extreme weather events links the country together because many different geographies experience this. I live in LA when I can, though I work in Princeton. The fires that we had that got into LA City proper are just speaking to the greater intensity and magnitude of the impact of climate on that particular parameter. So we think that's a window that allows people to understand in terms of their own immediacy the urgency of addressing climate change.
Yeah, I believe we need to take advantage of teachable moments as well. We should be the first voice and the loudest voice when a teachable moment occurs. And generally in public health, we're very cautious. It's the t-test and the p-values in the back of our minds from graduate school. It's like we want to be 95% certain that we're right. And by the way, we're the only real profession in the prevention world that's doing that. We hold ourselves to such a high standard. I think we need to relax just a little bit and be first in the room and to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I would just add that, and here I saw this intersection. You know, when we talk about the exposures to racial discrimination, whether they are structural racism or daily discrimination or economic, impact, we're ultimately talking about the stress response and how this increased stress and allostatic load burdens the immune system and makes people more vulnerable to not only acute disease, but to chronic disease. And so I think there's that conceptual nexus for us in this work as well. Whether you experience a severe weather event or you're a firefighter who's fighting a severe weather event, or you lose your home, or you're afraid that you're going to lose your home, or you're getting excess lead, I mean, all of these things ultimately translate into a physiological, biochemical stress reaction, and being in that state of an increased allostatic load is simply going to wear the body down and increase the chronic disease burdens, whether it's hypertension or diabetes. So I think this is a moment, a teachable moment, for us to develop a higher respect for what our capacity is for tolerating protracted and prolonged exposure to stress. And I think in terms of communication, we need to help people frame this as affecting them now, their mental and physical well-being.
The challenge for me is, that I spent the first half of my career practicing emergency medicine, and one of the lessons that I learned is that rich people die the same way as poor people. Dead is dead. Exposure to environmental pollutants impacts, in some ways, the well-to-do as well as it does low-income individuals. The well-to-do have capacity maybe to recover because they have maybe have air conditioning in their homes, or they may have filters in their air conditioning systems. But their children are just as exposed to allergens in the air. If there is a hurricane, it wiped out as many well-to-do homes, right, in the South, in Florida, in Texas, and even in Puerto Rico, as it did in low-income communities. The real challenge here is, of course, the recovery time and their ability to recover. How do we get folks that see themselves as the elite to understand this extraordinary risk is to them as well, so that they'll stop with some of the nonsense of not supporting this issue?
I believe that we should try to identify positive deviants, that is, individuals in this country who are part of the elite that are already on board. It's not the message, it's the messenger in many cases, and let them carry that message. If someone sees me show up in a bow tie, their eyes roll in the back of their head. Trust me, I spend a lot of time in red states. I need to dispense with the bow tie when I go there, frankly, because it doesn't serve me well. Okay? Having said that, though, really it's the right messenger at the right time, and if we can find those positive deviants, I think that would help us. And then let's learn from them what works, what doesn't work, and then scale that up.
Well, I know that Equal America has worked very hard, and this shout out to Bob on some of the communication tools that they've used, that we've created as an organization to try to address folks where they are. And so, Bob, just a shout out to you for those communication tools. Those are very, very helpful when we use those. Alonzo?
Yeah, I know. Being in the emergency response field for a long time, the thing that was both frustrating but also kind of an opportunity, there's a great deal of togetherness in real time in a disaster for the same things that you said. We are all in this together at the disaster. But then that togetherness fades. And it's something about keeping that sense that we are all in this together, not just during the time when you've had the flood, the hurricane, the wildfire, but building on that togetherness that is almost always there when you have the disaster, and keep moving that forward and using that as a lesson for what you need to do as a community, elites, marginalized, to mitigate, prevent those occurrences in the future. Have that longer tail of togetherness after disaster.
And if I could just pick up on that, again, one of the lessons we're learning from the racial healing work, we can live in our various separate enclaves, and we don't have authentic relationships across professional and racial and geographic lines. And we have to think of the work of building those relationships, of healing our collective sort of spiritual body, in terms of our sacred interconnectedness as a human family. We have to think of the work of that as real work.
Right, exactly.
We have to build community. I'm going to care about you if I care about you. If I know you, if I've seen you, if I've heard you. And so I think, we can actually build that into our strategies of actually bringing people together who are very different, and sharing narratives, because narratives move the heart. We have all the data in the world, but that doesn't really change our behavior. It's the story, it's the narrative, and it's also the understanding that, my child might suffer, but my child, if I see your child suffer, I should have empathy for that. So building capacity for empathy and compassion, building the sacred interconnectedness of the human family, I believe that's our work in this 21st century.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I could add, from Gail and Alonzo, those were real gems. The action is in the space between the professions. The action is in the space between communities, however you define those. And I think you guys said it really well. We need to spend more time outside of our bubble and less time talking in the echo chamber of social media and to ourselves. It's time to move outside, so I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Let me reach into the audience, because I want to start building community here, because it's not just the four of us on this stage. In the audience there.
Thank you for this session. Dr. Benjamin, you laid out on your slide a set of dangers of climate change, and I agree with all that. But it seems to me that the much more powerful argument about the public health benefits of action is the elimination of fossil fuels, which are killing people by thousands in this country, rich and poor alike. And if we can wean ourselves off of fossil fuels, combustion, the production, the use, we're going to have public health benefits that way dwarf anything that we're going to talk about climate, which frankly, we're not going to be able to change in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. We're not opposed in any way. We're not giving you a different message. Public health likes to look at the root cause of things. And yeah, the root cause is our utilization of fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels, the rise, which has resulted in rising carbon dioxide, et cetera. So while I didn't talk about the etiology of this, which is the burning of fossil fuels, that's absolutely true. And there's no question about that. And we make that case in most of our communications. There's a gentleman back here, and there's a young lady in the back, and then I'll come over here to John.
Thank you. When we were fighting the effort to destroy the California global warming statute, Tom Steyer and some other people spent a lot of money on research. And at that time, which was several years ago, found that people didn't care about climate change, but among the top two interests, one of them was health. And I have found that the space between the disciplines is absolutely critical. So I'm grateful for you saying that. I'm just wondering, how do healthcare professionals, increase their involvement, and how do they start screaming the alarm? Because too often it's just a wee small voice, and it's not the voice that I would like to hear.
Good point. You want to comment first, and then
I believe it's associations can be leaders in this issue, and I genuinely mean that. And associations can deliberately and profoundly partner with other associations whether they're health or not health related. And I think that we can only do what we can do. Let's not get depressed by trying to take on too much, one bite of the apple. And I know in this city, the health associations, I feel, are really partnering now in a way perhaps they weren't 5 years ago when I was here in an earlier professional iteration. You should take heart in that. Everyone's pulling together. Sometimes we benefit, sometimes somebody else benefits, but I think that's a part of the solution. When we speak in one voice, or largely one voice, I think it really sends a message across the country about the importance of this.
Can I just add that the nurses have been doing that in
Absolutely.
a way that is absolutely whatever. I would appreciate it greatly if physicians became as nearly as active as nurses.
Thank you. I think that's why Mona put together the Physician Consortium on Climate and Health that they've done at George Mason. Again, applaud their efforts. So there is absolutely trying to get that knowledge out there and build that activism. Out there in the audience there in the back. Sorry, I can't see you.
My name is Delia Heck, and I'm a professor of environmental science at Ferrum College in rural southwestern Virginia. I represent the Episcopal Church's Creation Care and Environmental Racism task force. I also sit on the board of a federally qualified health
FQHC.
FQAC.
What I'm not hearing today is one more component, and that is the agricultural sector. We just started a One Health minor because we can't find in academics a program that brings in the disease vectors of animals and insects and the food supply with the health, human health, and environmental health. You find it in public master's programs and doctoral programs in public health. You find it in agricultural programs. There are a few medical schools that deal with it, but there are institutions in this country where all three of those come together, certainly not at the undergraduate level. And it's not in our government. NIH has programs, Department of Agriculture has programs, we have Customs and Border Control that have programs of stopping things at the border, but there is nothing in this country that's cohesive that brings food, humans, and disease, and the environment together. So I'm curious, in that space you're talking about, what are your organizations trying to do to bring all of those things together? How do we bring them food and human health and the environment? Because I need resources to start teaching classes in the fall.
Well, I can tell you that on the advocacy front, APHA is very much involved in the One Health movement, led by our members of our association who are in veterinary medicine and interested in food nutrition have gotten together. So there are activities happening on One Health around the country on the advocacy front.
Yeah, we do a lot of leadership training. I'll just give one example. For years and years, we had a program that trained clinical leaders, but they were only physicians. That's been changed where they now include all health professions, including veterinarians, around trying to generate leadership in connecting these different disciplines. You know, that's a start. But I agree that lack of connection it plagues us on the research side because we don't have those kind of transdisciplinary approaches to these problems, and it doesn't inform our practice. But that's a little bit about what we're doing, putting different leaders together early in their career so they can learn from each other.
Yeah, and NEHA has submitted as a co-applicant to the State Department to work in One Health with the University of Minnesota. This is around workforce capacity building on the issues that you've just described. I'm not saying it's the end-all be-all, but it's a start for us.
I'm going to get this one last question from the audience. John, on that, and then...
We talked about NCDs, and when we think about NCDs, we're usually talking about lung disease and heart disease, diabetes.
Non-communicable disease.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Epidemics of suicide, drug abuse, and mental health disorders. And I think that these things are linked. I know
Next panel.
of the spiritual world. How do we address what is really, I think, a very profound crisis of spirituality and mental health in the same breath that we are addressing health inequities and disproportionate exposures to those stresses?
I can tell you that our Faith Caucus has very much been involved in a lot of our environmental health efforts at APHA, and this has come up in some of the discussions, I believe, in our tribal think tank, where we've been working with the Native American community as well. But let me let my colleagues, not that because we need to close.
We've got to close. I would just thank you for the observation and the question, and I used the word spiritual earlier. I would just say that the first sort of theoretical underpinning of the racial healing work we do, the RX racial healing work, is a highly developed capacity for self-compassion through mindful awareness. I believe that we cannot give what we don't have, and if we don't have compassion for ourselves, deep compassion that's been developed through spiritual discipline, we tend to project our fears and our anxieties onto others. So this is the real work of the continuum of development, and I believe compassion is the central missing element in our society, regardless of religion or faith. Ultimately, the commonality of almost all of the world's faiths is this development of the capacity for compassion and love.
You know, that's a great question. I was wondering what's going to link. I spent the last 2 days at the National Academies on the opioid crisis. What links that crisis to this crisis are those things. That despair at a cultural level, alienation, marginality, you know, I couldn't agree more.
Would you please give a great round of applause to Dr. Gail Christopher, Dr. Alonzo Paul, and Dr. David Geiger. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
All right.
I don't have anything to add to this marvelous set of thoughts and inspirational suggestions we heard from our panel. So now it's my pleasure. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think it was worth really going to the. I wasn't saying anything worthwhile. I was just saying, we are in debt to this amazing panel for their wonderful, inspirational suggestions, and we really appreciate the audience participation, great questions, and really going to be helpful to us as we move forward in this work that's so important. So now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa, I believe, who's going to be introducing the faith sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, what an inspiring paneling. And the next one is going to be as well. So now we're going to keep moving to the second plenary of the day, and this is going to be with faith leaders. And here to introduce this panel is Annie Fett-Cruz. So please welcome Annie.
Good morning. You all look so nice today. So I am Annie Fett-Cruz. I've met many of you, but not all of you. There's a lot of you here. But I am the director of Blessed Tomorrow, which is the faith engagement program for Eco-America. And I've been with the program for a little over a year and a half. And I have to say that the people I get to work with every day are some of the most passionate, deeply rooted, committed individuals who are leading organizations and programs and work across the country to help engage people of faith, all faith traditions, to address climate change as part of their efforts to care for God's creation. So it's an incredible honor that I have to be here with you today. And just to echo the wonderful exercise that we did this morning, I'm here and I do this work because of my 13-year-old daughter. As a mom, I want to make sure that I leave her and I do everything that I can to leave her a world where she can live a healthy life. She has pretty serious asthma, and I am deeply concerned. I'm deeply concerned about how she's going to be living her adulthood when I'm no longer here. And so I'm very committed, and so are many of you and the folks that we're going to be meeting today. First, I wanted to introduce Blessed Tomorrow. Let me make sure I do this correctly. There we go. So, why faith in climate? I know many of you have come to conferences before and you might be familiar with our programs, but for those of you who aren't, just think about your home community. Just think about it for a moment. Can you picture the places of worship that you walk by, drive by, bike by on a regular basis? As people of faith, again, people of all faith traditions, we are in every community in America. We are working, we're growing families, we're going to school, we're playing. We are communities. We are America's communities. And our faith leaders are shepherding us from all walks of life on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. So we know our communities. We are our communities, and we certainly see and hear the lived experiences of the people that we serve. And of course, our faiths teach us about God's creation, this beautiful world that we live in, and why we're called to care for it and leave it better than we found it for future generations. And as faith leaders, we can have a really powerful moral voice with policymakers and with people in positions of power. We can speak truth. We can bring hope. And yes, even from a place of a higher calling to this work. And which can be very difficult at times. And so I encourage you all, if you're not already working with people of faith in your communities, reach out to them. They can really be a valuable asset in this work, and they're probably already doing this work. And so they'd love to partner with you. So at Blessed Tomorrow, we work with a coalition of faith institutions and leaders who, again, are committed to this effort. Again, we probably couldn't fit everyone on a slide. So you can see that there's incredible support among the faith community across the country here, at a national level, at regional levels, at state levels, and at local levels. And Blessed Tomorrow supports these partners by helping them to visibly lead on climate solutions, to help challenge their networks, their members, to engage, not just in mitigating climate change, but also in advocating for climate solutions. And we've been developing tools and trainings, polling, research, to help support those efforts and to help disseminate them throughout the networks of those institutions. So, what have we been up to this past year? We convened about 50 faith leaders, national faith leaders from across the country in New York City last May to talk about how we could deepen engagement among our communities. I'm really called to work to increase the number and the intensity of action and advocacy among people of faith across the country. And we've been invited by, one more. Let me go back. There we go. We've been invited by partners to run trainings at their national conventions to help their clergy and lay leaders talk more confidently about climate change and help motivate and mobilize others to do so in their own communities. We've filmed several wonderful videos. If you haven't seen them, you can visit blessedtomorrow.org to check them out. This is a lovely behind-the-scenes video or shot of one of the most recent ones that we just conducted. And we're going to be launching our new Blessed Tomorrow Moving Forward guide, which many of you received when you picked up your opening packets. This is a really wonderful tool that's been supported by many of our faith partners to develop to help congregations do 3 core things. So increase their creation stewardship, again, that mitigation piece. Helping them to think about their house of worship and their congregation as a place of refuge as we think about climate impacts that are happening today and in the near future. So adaptation. And certainly thinking about how we can increase bearing witness and serving as voices for our own communities, telling our own stories with local, state, and national decision makers. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. It'll be online next week, hopefully. And of course, we're also going to be launching a new training program for clergy and lay leaders called the Faith and Climate Ambassadors Program, and that will be launching later this fall. And we're going to be conducting those trainings with partners throughout the country, hopefully helping to train a cohort of individuals, several hundred, who can go out and talk to others in their communities. So really thinking of that snowflake model of organizing where we can increase the number of individuals who are doing this work on the ground in supporting many of the other organizations who are already engaged in those kinds of activities. So I want to introduce our wonderful moderator for this panel on engaging faith communities and climate, Ms. Jacqueline DuPont Walker. Jackie, in addition to being a board member of Eco America, Jackie is the founding president of the Ward Economic Development Corporation and chair of the Social Action Committee for the African Methodist Episcopal Church. For over 42 years, she has been a professional in the public and private sectors. Her strong commitment and calling to faith-centered and empowering development has made her a prophetic voice locally and nationally. Jackie was a pioneer for desegregation at a major university and has trailblazed on behalf of women and people of color in many arenas. As social action chair for the AME Church, she has led in stimulating the social action justice initiatives for AME Church in the interfaith, ecumenical, civic, public, and secular spheres. And at the 2016 50th Quadrennial Session of the AME Church, Jackie coordinated and organized the passage of a climate change resolution, a first for a historic Black faith group. She is passionate, she is committed, and her voice is sought nationally on issues of social justice. Please help me in welcoming Ms. Jacqueline DuPont Walker.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I want to say, as our panel assembles, thank you to Eco America for the faithfulness and the steadfastness in making sure that we are not slackers in protecting our environment. A special thanks to Bob Perkowitz and to Megan and her team. And you need to not only thank, but say a prayer for Anita, who has to find us and remind us that Blessed Tomorrow is something that we should make a high priority. She does a wonderful job. Please give a round of applause to Anita Faith Cruz. I bring you greetings from the place I live, which is Los Angeles. And our mayor, Eric Garcetti, wants me to tell you that he has declared the new Green New Deal that protects the Paris Climate Agreement and again makes the statement for economic justice and equity. Yeah. And he believes, you may fight with him about it, but he believes that Los Angeles is still the leader in environmental justice in this nation. And as you heard historically, I bring you greetings from Tallahassee, Florida. And up until recently, I had to admit that I was from the home of the Hanging Chads, but now I'm from the home of Andrew Gillum.
There you go.
And shout out to the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That is where I do my faith walk and where we like to believe that we walk the talk. I want to give honor to the Council of Bishops of our church who are in session now and not able to be present with us, but who have affirmed in our last meeting of the General Conference a covenant with Eco America to be serious about this business. And also to the 6,000 congregations who on a daily basis take this seriously. But we must admit, and we're here today with our own form of confession, we have not yet done enough. From Psalms 118th book, the 24th division, we are accustomed to saying, "This is the day the Lord hath made, let us rejoice and be glad in it." But I want to share with you today from the Message translation. This is God's work. We rub our eyes. We can hardly believe it. This is the very day God acted. Let us celebrate and be festive. And so today, I am reminded of the builder's stone and the imperfect stones that were put on the shelf, and how the builder went back repeatedly to take a look at those stones and to try to determine what else could be done before the stones were ready. Today we come as persons of faith on this panel, understanding that we are the stones on the shelf and that we have some more work to do. And we want to talk with you about what has been done so far, to be encouraged from each other and from you, and then with you in questions and answers and dialogue, talk about where we need to go. I was just enthralled by the last panel where I learned we could even settle this country's debt with the $3 trillion. Couldn't we do it? Yes. And what other places are we yet not as faithful as we should be in order to make it happen? As faith communities, we find ourselves dealing with a number of issues, a number of problems, a number of challenges, but we know that we have the answer in our faith walk. We also know that it is not about those problems. It is about being faithful to the walk we have all been given as human beings to care for this earth. And so we believe that today we start anew, that we unmute ourselves in a very special way. The conversations we should or could have had with others about this topic, we will leave from this place to have that conversation and dialogue. Let me introduce those who are going to lead us in this conversation. And it is a stellar group that has been assembled. I have asked their permission because of who I am in my walk. My mentor told me your title is not who you are. So we are all going to be, because it's a family conversation, first and last name. I start with John Dorhauer, who is the general minister and president in the United Church of Christ. He is someone who is passionate about social justice. He even wrote his paper on white privilege. I couldn't believe as he introduced himself and told me that a number of years ago. But I have come to know him in a very special way because he and I are co-chairing an initiative of the National Council of Churches to end racism now. This is someone serious about the work he brings to that. And then Melanie Zhang, did I get it right? I speak Chinese now. Is a climate change campaign coordinator for Sojourner and co-chair of the Young Evangelicals for Climate Change. She is compelled, please give that, Young Evangelical. She is compelled to make sure that we take seriously the climate justice walk because of Jesus' calling to love the least of these and Jesus' invitation to love her neighbor as she loves herself. Melanie. And then we have Huda Alkaf, who is the founder and director of the Wisconsin Green Muslims, a grassroots environmental justice group which connects faith, environmental justice, and sustainability through education and service. She is a founding member of the Interfaith Earth Network of Southeast Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Interfaith Power and Light. And as she shared with me this morning, she comes in her own voice, not representing anyone, but her faith walk and knowing that her faith walk is something that will just catch fire in her community. Amazing. And then Jonah Passner, who serves as the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, where his work is focused on encouraging Jewish communities to reach across the lines of race, class, and faith in campaigns for social justice. He, along with Barbara Williams Skinner on yesterday, convened a group of leaders in the faith community with members of Congress who were invited to come if they saw fit. And under his leadership, over 20 members of Congress came in. Folk, it was a revival. They came in to say, we've got to do more, and guess what? The key is in the faith community. And so we welcome this stellar panel who is going to enliven us today, and I invite them to come in order to please introduce themselves to this family conversation, and then we will have open dialogue. Are we ready?
Yes. It's an honor both to be invited to speak to this body and to do so with these remarkable religious faith leaders. I represent at one and the same time a Christian faith that is largely responsible for the climate change that we're dealing with. Our distortion of what was a biblical call to be stewards over creation was turned into a mandate to be dominions over creation. And our colonial footprint as Christians around the globe has largely contributed to an understanding of consumerist ideology that has us where we are today. But I also represent a United Church of Christ and a body of Christ that for decades now has been committed to remaining faithful to be stewards of and not dominions over. In 1987, the Commission for Racial Justice, chaired by Ben Chavis of the United Church of Christ, wrote a landmark document on environmental racism that changed how we talk about environmental justice. And in 2013, the United Church of Christ became the first religious body anywhere in the world to call for divestment from fossil fuels. The author of that resolution, Jim Antal, is sitting right over there. Yep. I just want to briefly mention two commitments that have us in the game on climate change and that commit us to changing how people understand their role or responsibility as stewards of creation. The first is actually a book written by Jim called Climate Church, Climate World, which makes the argument that the vocation of the church under these conditions is to be the stewards of creation, that is now our reason for being. I say it this way: the United Church of Christ has long been committed to the work of justice, but what I say now is if we can't resolve this justice issue around climate change, it will resolve all other justice issues for us. Mm. And so the call for the church and for communities of faith to make their singular vocation the restoration of the planet is an argument that we're all in on. The second thing I want to talk about is 3 years ago, we wrote a purpose, vision, and mission statement. We articulated our purpose this way as the United Church of Christ. Our purpose is to love the Lord our God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. Our neighbor is ourselves. That's our purpose. Our vision, which answered the question, if we complete and fulfill our purpose and our mission, what do we see? Was a just world for all. And in order to enact and embody and incarnate those commitments, we launched what we call our Three Great Loves campaign, calling for all of the covenant partners and local congregations of the United Church of Christ to commit to three great loves: love of neighbor, love of children, and more importantly here, love of creation. And we now dedicate a portion of our website to local congregations telling the stories of how they embody and incarnate their commitment to love of creation. The power of those narratives generates not just enthusiasm for, but commitments to global justice that we are proud of and remain fully committed to. Thank you.
Never follow John Donauer. Can we please celebrate this amazing faith leader? So I want to begin by just bringing strength and receiving strength from my Muslim and Christian family at this moment, because we're still in the week of mourning for the Chabad of Poway shooting, and we're still in the month of mourning for Christchurch, New Zealand, and Sri Lanka. Our Muslim family, our Christian family, our Jewish family, our whole human family is under attack. And so we need each other now more than ever. And so thank God for you and us together. And it isn't just the whole human family, it's the whole family of God's creation that calls to us at this moment, which is what brings us here. So I want to share an anecdote to frame my comments, which is that I was invited to speak to the board of a major historic environmental advocacy organization in Washington a few years ago by a board member who said, my fellow board members don't really understand the power of and the role of the faith community in advocating for environmental justice. Will you come speak to them? And I said, sure, and I made the case that I often make, which is, if you combine the kind of moral imperative of the shared faith community, like the mandate from all of the major religious traditions to steward the earth that you heard from Reverend Donauer just a second ago, with our people power, right? The tens of millions of people in our churches, our mosques, and our synagogues who vote That's a really powerful alignment. So mobilize and organize the faith community on these issues, right? Because every Friday or every Saturday, every Sunday, we go to institutions in which we hear this sacred call to steward the earth. And then we vote. And the first question, a member of the board of this major organization said, well, what if I don't believe in God? I was like, you just missed the whole point. You missed the whole point, right? So I think oftentimes many of our friends, our allies, our family members are so stuck in working through theological conundrum, which are, frankly, hard, that they can't get past it enough to hear the wonderful message we heard just a few moments ago and that we're going to hear from my colleagues. I think that we need to kind of exhale a little bit to be inspired by the various faith traditions that answer theological questions differently, live in the gray of our own complex religious beliefs, and then organize. Because tens of millions of people go to church, go to mosque, go to synagogue, go to temples, and then go vote. Am I being clear?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. So for me, what's rooting my theological imperative is the same biblical source that John just referenced, the stewardship, which was misappropriated into dominion. And I know it was misappropriated because the earliest rabbis told a midrash, a story about the story, right? And that's what the rabbis did in antiquity in order to teach you something deeper. And the midrash, which is a seminal kind of classic midrash, most kids in Hebrew school learn this midrash, tells the story of God saying to those first human beings, named Adam and Eve in some of our traditions, and said, listen, this is the last world that I'm going to create. So take care of it, because there won't be another earth to follow it. Those words, that simple little legend from thousands of years ago, echo across eternity because they're still as true today. So let me shift from the theological imperative in the 16 seconds that I have left. Wow. Because I gave the first minute over to my interfaith handhold, may I borrow 60 more seconds? 60, yeah, 1 minute, yeah. Will you forgive me spot me 1 minute? Okay. During the Q&A, I'll happily get more specific, but the question is, what is the way in which we actually organize our people power and our institutions to have an impact? I'm glad that Jackie referenced Los Angeles. The Reformed Jewish congregations, there's nearly 100 congregations across California, partnered across lines of difference with churches, with environmental agencies and organizations to pass SB 100, which was a California state bill that basically mandated that by 2054, California would become carbon neutral. Historic, you can celebrate that. And state by state, city by city, town by town, if the faith community, which is, again, local institutions and organizations that have impact, that have people power, partner with one another and across lines of difference, we can then pass state and local legislation. We can then build enough federal power that in 2020 and 22, we can actually take the country back where it needs to go on this very important issue. And I'm happy to speak more in the Q&A about these issues. That goes by fast.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. My name is Melody. I want to start off at first about talking about something that happened in the UK last week for 10 days straight, no less. Now I realize this conference is called Eco America, but who's to say that we can't be inspired from our global leaders, brothers and sisters, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I want to lift up a small group of committed Christians who participated in climate demonstrations last week. They stood shoulder to shoulder with Extinction Rebellion, or XR, one of the largest climate movement builders in the UK, to practice civil disobedience. And on Maundy Thursday, members brought soap, towels, and buckets to wash the feet of exhausted fellow protesters for 5 hours to demonstrate their love and care for them. On Easter, members of Christian Climate Action UK sat on London roads and became church, sharing bread and wine, scripture, and they sang as they celebrated the resurrection on the roads. Noting that the church has £123 million invested in major fossil fuel companies, they dropped a large banner off the balcony of the General Synod Chamber of the Church of England while debates were taking place. They urged the church to divest from fossil fuels, and these were young Christians. Their actions were both faithful and strategic. They deliberately chose to partner with the larger movement in order to build power together in solidarity. But they operated out of a distinct moral philosophy and a servant-led posture which deeply humbled and penetrated through to the entire climate movement as well, transforming it from the inside. Their faithful actions made headlines in international news. In the US, guess where that kind of energy and creativity is coming from? It's from young people, and most often, young women. How many of you have heard of the youth-led... How many of you have heard of the youth-led climate strikes, which reverberated in every state, drawing out hundreds of young people? Did you know that that was orchestrated by two young women, Isra Hersey and Haven Coleman? I went to cover the youth climate strike in the Capitol, and it was a joy to be there. There was art, dancing, a time of silence. It was like a festival. And it was a group of young people called Sunrise who brought the issue of climate change back to the forefront of the national conversation where it belongs. It reminds me of how in the civil rights movement, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, alongside MLK, was a pivotal force in bringing about transformation in the social structure. The House Committee on the Climate Crisis held its very first hearing this month, and guess who they invited up to the mic? 4 young people. The vast majority of young people all across the spectrum tell us that they see climate change as the issue of our time. Young Christians are breaking new ground in the pews and on the streets, and we care not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Christians, convicted by our faith to love our neighbor as ourselves and to keep and protect our earth. In 2015, my organization, Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, wrote hundreds of letters to the National Association of Evangelicals to adopt a formal public stance on climate change, and they did. We've been mobilizing our generation of evangelicals to act on climate through leading workshops and greening initiatives in their congregations, equipping fellows to do a major project on their campuses, like getting solar panels installed at their school, and praying and petitioning Congress to enact just and compassionate climate policy that rises to the real challenge of the climate crisis. I have been amazed to witness the faithfulness of young Christians engaging their pastors in dialogue about creation care and climate change, finding common language and values while committed to biblical rootedness. They lead with moral clarity and speak with moral authority. Scripture says, "Let no one look down on you because you are young, but set the believers an example in speech and love and faith and purity." Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. From my work at Sojourners as their climate justice coordinator, we recognize the powerful potential of the church to be a mobilizing agent. That's why we work with congregations to cultivate leadership, starting from creation care all the way to effective, sustained climate advocacy, while developing a narrative of the climate crisis that spotlights our neighbors and their health and well-being already being impacted. Climate leadership in church is not only faithful, but it is strategic again. First of all, Scripture is clear that we're made to be stewards of God's wonderful creation, to serve and protect. And it's even more clear that our greatest commandment is to love God and love neighbor. Second, it is a functional hub for local grassroots efforts, as it was in the civil rights movement. There are century-deep traditions and liturgies embedded in the church which help people cope with the emotional grief we're susceptible to as we live into this work. Finally, we tend to forget the sole mission of the church is to make disciples. It's about becoming people of God, being transformed to the likeness of Jesus. Responding to climate change requires repentance, lifestyle change, sacrifice, all of these things which the church is well-versed in. So that's where I find my breakthrough, and that's where I find my hope today is young people in the church. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, I greet you with the Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you all. With the sighting of the new crescent moon, the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar, Ramadan, the blessed month of the Quran, the holy book for Muslims, and daily fasting, no food or drinks, including water, from dawn till dusk, will begin on May 6th. Not today, but May 6th. I'll be at lunch today. So. For Muslims, the main purpose of fasting is to become more aware of and sensitive to the plight of the poor, hungry, and thirsty. Ramadan is a month of a spiritual consciousness, generous giving, compassion, and high sense of social responsibility and prayer. At this time of darkness, due to environmental and climate injustices suffered by the most vulnerable, including current and future generations here in this country and around the world, it is important for us to do everything we can. Prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him, is reported to have said, if doomsday is about to take place, where any one of us has a tree sapling which we can cultivate, let us cultivate it, for we will be rewarded. This is a message of active hope, which inspires me. My tree sapling is Wisconsin Green Muslims, a statewide grassroots environmental justice volunteer group formed in 2005. Connecting faith, environmental justice, and sustainability through education and service. It seeks to educate the Muslim community and the public at large about the Islamic environmental teachings and to apply these teachings in daily life and to form coalitions, I repeat, to form coalitions with others working toward a just, healthy, peaceful, and sustainable future. Our work is guided and inspired by sacred teachings from the Quran and the Hadith, which is reports on the sayings and traditions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. For 14 years now, Wisconsin Green Muslim has worked on environmental justice issues related to climate change, clean air, pure water, healthy food, solar energy and energy efficiency, waste reduction, and transit equity. The model that works for us is to designate a theme for each month, focus on it with participants from different Islamic centers, formal and informal Islamic schools and institutions, quantify the results and celebrate the outcomes, then move to a new theme in the next month. This diverse approach enables us to connect with a variety of constituents who join our circle at the point of entry that matches their interest, whether it is water equity with lead issues that affect vulnerable population, community vegetable gardens with families participating, and intergenerational exchange of knowledge that takes place. Solar energy and energy efficiency with engineers and facility managers coming into the fold. Friendly recycling competitions with robust youth participation. Or transit equity issues with seniors, students, and people of disability concerned about transit access and affordability. We connect climate justice to all these issues. Our work culminates in Green Ramadan, which is one of our successful campaigns, where we celebrate it with daily actions to reduce our ecological footprints and consumption impacts. Our Green Ramadan daily calendar is posted on our website, wisconsingreenmuslims.org. The Greening Ramadan campaign, and the emphasis here is on the greening, is as it is a continuous process, began in Wisconsin and is practiced now in over 20 states. With over 60 mosques participating nationwide, a number that grows each year. In honor of these blessed days, I pray, God, unite us and empower us to serve in restoring the world, protecting creation, the healing of earth, and renewal of all life in a just, peaceful, and sustainable way. Transform our lives, enhance our renewable energy resources, strengthen our collaborative work and relationships, reduce our ecological footprint, and enable us to stand up together for environmental justice, climate justice, clean air, clean water, healthy food, sanitation, and peaceful existence for all as human rights and creation rights issues. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. I hope you've begun to think about ways you want to share. I'll say to the panel at the end, I'd like for you to think about one question I'd like to raise. And since we have so much unfinished business from the faith world, how would you involve three major constituencies that are not very visible in our movement, our elders, who have the wealth of knowledge and wealth of time, our homeless brothers and sisters, as well as those who have rejected the faith groups. Questions from the audience? We've done so well, there are no questions.
Oh,
there
sorry.
you are.
Oh.
I see one there. Oh, I'm sorry. Could you hold? And we actually have a microphone. Thank you.
I do. Thank you. Hi, my name is Julie Lim. So I come from a Korean Christian conservative background. That's where my family grew up in that. So I grew up in the church, but they're very not into environmentalism and sustainability. So I've been chastised and somewhat ostracized because of my beliefs in that. So I'm vegan, so that's one. And one time I remember someone was praying and said, "Oh, thank God that He gave us meat to eat." And knowing, because He said that because I was vegan. And they also one time told me that, like, gave me a burger and said, "This is what, something that God gave you, so you should be eating this. You're being very ungrateful." And so I've been hurt from the church a lot, from my stances, especially in my environmental stance and things like that. And so I was wondering do you know of any groups that reach out to, like, different, more diverse groups of people of faith, like Koreans or like more conservative areas, and like the best approach to speaking with them?
Where do you live?
I live in Orange County, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I will say absolutely, please see me afterwards, and I will make sure that you are connected. I can think of Haiping, who is in Los Angeles, who is very much engaged with social equity and justice and the faith community, and one closer to home. And I think her point is very well taken, that sometimes in the midst of a group that has a stated mission, there is an unstated intent not to carry it forward. And so thank you for being bold. Thank you for having that mustard seed faith. And please, let's talk right after.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm grateful to work with members of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And the resounding message that Dr. Christopher earlier said about the fact that we need to meet with one another and build empathy and build bridges, I see resounding from everything that you've said, and I see happening here, thanks to the group to bringing us together and building bridges. When we try to bring members of our particular community together, we find that we just simply don't have enough time, or people are exhausted. And I'm wondering, too, what your advice is on getting people together to move past. I mean, I feel like the picture in my mind that I heard somewhere is the idea that there's a fire in our house and that the children are in the attic. And I don't feel like that message is getting across, and we can't do that just with numbers. What's been working in your faith communities to bring people together, or is it easier to go to where the people are, or a little bit of everything? What's your experience with bringing people together?
Yeah, I shared our model, which works well for us. Like, that's how people come on board, the Muslim community. But also, we have two initiatives. One is Faith Communities for Equitable Solar. And we talk here about light. We talk about, and we have a similar parallel, which is Faithful Rainwater Harvesting. So we talk about water. And we talk about the sacredness of light and water, and how they are the commons, and no one owns them, and everyone should have access to them responsibly. With these messages, I have been invited to a large number of different faiths. Like, we connected through these initiatives with 18 different faith traditions in Wisconsin, and traveled all over the state and built wonderful interfaith relationships with people of goodwill, like all over, talking about how we can appreciate those gifts, sacredness of light and water, and bring them into our homes, lives, and congregations. And we do provide, and how we can make it equitable, how we can access that. So it has been a wonderful journey and connections with large, diverse constituents. That has been the case. Yeah.
May I offer?
Yes.
So one additional thought, and I invoke the name of my Lutheran pastor mentor, Reverend John Heinemeyer, who taught me what I'm about to share with you. He's an ELCA minister who I met in Roxbury, Mass. John taught me you start by meeting the people where they are and listen to their real stories and what they're struggling with. So I learned my trade as a community organizer under John. And so we just actually, in the Reformed Jewish movement, launched a movement-wide listening campaign where we asked our congregations to have hard conversations about what they were really up against, what they were concerned about and struggling with, that rose to the level that they would really engage and work on. And we heard 3 core stories over and over again. One was around racial justice and inequality in America. The other was around the plague of gun violence, particularly in our schools and our houses of worship. And the third was the coming climate crisis and a feeling of like desperation that, particularly for congregations that are in low sea level areas, that they have an existential threat. We can now organize those congregations and communities based on the commitments that they made because they went through a process of discernment. So I would invite, and the ALCA knows something about community organizing, and I would invite, for all the activists in the room, it's much less effective when you go to a church or a congregation or a mosque and say, you should care about X, but rather to come with some humility and say, what are folks really dealing with and what are you up against, and how can our, whatever campaign it is, clean water campaign, carbon neutral campaign, be supportive of what you're really struggling with as a community. Does that make sense?
If I might briefly add to that, I think a big thing for me is to find common language amongst people, and I think it's really important to, well, first of all, I think there are people who are always going to be sort of, climate change doubt, deniers, and like very loud minority of people who do that. But I think that we don't need to get 100% of people in order to build a strong movement. I think the best movements have really just been, 10% very committed minority of people who have really brought things to a paradigm shift. And so I think really coming to a community, like Rabbi said, with humility and with a spirit of listening to how can we support you and how can we build relationships with people who are already climate curious and open to that kind of discussion, and really strengthening them and empowering them and making them kind of walking alongside them really to take them from earthkeeping and these biblical and these foundations all the way to climate advocacy. And so I find common language to be a good strategy.
And let me share with you that we're finding that I'll call them professional church people, those of us who show up at meetings, are not necessarily our greatest assets. We have found that there are members of the church or family members of the church who are actively engaged outside of the church context. And when they finally hear that we have caught the vision, they are not only willing to listen, but to come and be engaged. Recently, when Echo America encouraged us to do a survey of what was happening in our local congregations, we had an expectation that a few hundred would respond, and it doubled that. And many of those people are ones who we would never have known were engaged, and they can actually walk the talk within the church context in a way they were not encouraged to do before because we were doing church. And so I would say what we found is that that's our wealth, and that's the group we now must look to do it, rather than people who have titles within our church and in leadership roles within the church. So no better way to evangelize for us now than to look at the places where people do have concern and issues and expertise, but we're not bringing it into the faith communication. Okay.
Reverend Michael Malcolm. I worked as a chaplain at one point in time, and in the hospital we did interdisciplinary team approach so that we could actually minister to the whole person. Do you see that can happen in the environmental space? And how do you see that taking place in the environmental space?
I don't know, Michael, that I'm going to answer the question you're asking. So if not, we'll have an offline conversation. My undergraduate degree was in Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy.
You had a lot of fun in college, didn't you?
Okay. Western civilization built its philosophical and theological underpinnings on the notion of dichotomy, separating the spiritual from the material, right? That's Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas in a nutshell. And therefore, we miss the deep connections that exist in a more Eastern understanding of the world about how what you do to one affects the other. We treat medicine that way. We treat the divisions within our cultures that way, and we treat the environment that way. It is a physical, material thing that we have dominion over, and when the earth hurts, we fail to hear it. But there are spiritualities extant in our land today that literally hear the earth crying out, right? And I think that Western civilization must wrestle with its love affair with this dichotomous understanding between the spiritual and the material. And until we do that, it's going to be hard to resolve this climate change issue that we're dealing with.
Beautiful.
I think I'm decoding the clock here. Do I have 2 minutes and 57 seconds?
Yeah, I would like to add to that. So by my personal journey, so I'm an ecologist, but how I started, I had 2 degrees, one in biology and one in chemistry. And I was not satisfied with that, so I went into ecology, because ecology is the study of interconnection and interdependencies. And I became a systems ecologist, which is looking at the system and not at the parts. And when I look at the system, faith is part of that system. I could not be me without bringing in this integration of faith and ecology, and that's what became my journey now. And like yesterday, there was this 2 breaking sessions, breaking groups. I joined 2 groups. One was the faith group, but the other one was diversifying the climate leadership group. I felt the faith voice needs to be there. I need to be there. I'm working on climate change. And I'm also a faith person, a person of faith. So this is my life, has been always just integrating both of them. And I have been knocking on so many environmental organizations' doors to become part of that coalition. That we've been part of many coalitions, but we've been the only faith group in that space. Only faith group.
Good for you.
It's been a struggle, but it's my passion. So I would love to mention that. It's just looking at the whole system benefits us.
I need to give up my anonymity to ask this question. I'm Reverend Earl Coteen. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I work full-time in climate and environmental justice. And the other day, I was visiting a Unitarian church, and I was reminded once again why we're sometimes called God's frozen people. Whereas when I walked into this auditorium yesterday, Ashley was so full of energy and welcoming. Not only did it make me feel better, but it started bouncing off on other people as well. And so my question is, the question of I'm active in Green the Church. And for those of you who don't know, it's the Black church response to climate change. And the first time I asked, could a pale male attend? And they said yes. And it was the most warm and wonderful welcome. And so I really would like to ask a question about how do we, in an interfaith situation, do more and more to welcome the stranger so that they participate and also find the courage to get the hell out of the pews and into the communities that are most directly suffering. Thank you.
That's an excellent last question.
We don't work in the pews. Well, yeah, on the carpet, yes. That's one point, sure.
Well,
But we are in the community. Wisconsin Green Muslim is a grassroots group. We are in the community, yeah.
From this dialogue, I've just pulled 4 key points. That we must tell our story of how we're all in so that we can encourage others and sustain ourselves in the work we're doing. That we must organize, and then take action, and one of the main actions is to vote and elect good people. That we must take the message on the road to the street, and that's actually back to the future. Most of us don't remember Dr. Martin Luther King when he started. He was in his 20s. Or in my context, Richard Allen, who's frozen at age 83 in all of our photos, who walked out and had the first civil rights movement in this country at age 26. That we must build coalitions, that they're keys. We must welcome those who've caught the vision, who have not been a part of us. And so as we end, if you feel it, say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And can I get an amen?
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the faith walks that you have and for inspiring us to do more. We realize that sitting through plenaries is quite challenging sometimes, and I want to harness our faith panel who say sitting is the new smoking, and stand up for a minute and stretch, just to be able to move your body around, move blood around, maybe say hi or introduce yourself to the person next to you. Okay, I did say 1 minute, so can we all now come back together for our last panel? We just have one more panel. So if everyone can now finish your conversations and be seated again, we can get going. All right, we've got one person sitting, 2 people sitting. Let's all come back so we can start the next and final panel of the day. And I can't believe it is already here, our last panel of the day, the last panel of the summit. And we're very excited. If we can all take a seat, we can invite them on the stage. Thank you, everybody. So this last panel that we're going to do is on local communities. Yeah. Do I need to do the clap 1, clap twice thing? Yeah, if you hear me, clap once. If you hear me, clap twice. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, so our last panel is on local communities, and I'm very pleased to bring on stage to announce this last plenary Jennifer Roberts. She is the Sector Director for the Path to Positive Communities program at EcoAmerica, and she also is the former mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks for everybody for hanging in here. We're batting cleanup, which means we had Senator Whitehouse, we've had 2 amazing panels, and we're the 3rd, so we're going to be the home run. Woohoo! So I'm Jennifer Roberts. I represent the community sector for EcoAmerica. The community is where we bring everybody together, right? I heard some folks yesterday say, we're hearing all about federal and state things that are going on. What about local politics, local community, local connections? This is where we can bring the health, the faith, the business, the nonprofit folks together, is in our local communities. I forgot I have a clicker. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. So you may recognize some of the mayors of our country here. I'm wearing the same suit. As if I needed to stand out more, right? But we, mayors around the country and council members and county commissioners have worked to do what our federal government has not done. That's stay in the Paris Accords. And so local governments can really make a big difference. And the Path to Positive Communities program for Eco-America, it's a mouthful, but that's where we go to our local communities. We work with national partners. So here are some of the partners we work with. The National League of Cities, which reaches all 19,000 of America's cities. We also work with the climate mayors. We work with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. We are trying to reach into every community, and we know how diverse our communities are. So what we rely on is our local partners who know who the players are, what the state regulations are that they operate under, who the different demographics are in their region. Their minorities are different in every city across America. The geography is different. The type of energy they have is different. We rely on our local partners to be those voices who really know what's going on. And we are really grateful. I know some of our partners are in the audience, and we're really grateful for you. So we've had a lot of successes working with these folks. I just want to briefly talk about what's happened in Utah. You can see we actually helped them design a website, Path to Positive Utah, that includes resources from Eco-America, that helps them reach their community leaders, helps them bring leadership circles together, and to message in the right way that is neutral, that is nonpartisan, that is going to be able to reach everyone. Because we have in America, I think almost 2/3 of our mayors are Republicans. The big city mayors, a lot of them are Democrats, but we have to work in both places. And so we have seen amazing change in Utah. 5 years ago, you couldn't talk about climate change. They have passed, since they became partners with Eco-America, we have seen them pass 2 pieces of legislation. One which admitted climate change was something they had to plan around and was a real concern for the state. The second just passed a few weeks ago. It allows Rocky Mountain Power to bring communities to 100% clean energy if those cities make a commitment that they want to go 100% clean by 2030. This is in conservative Utah. So we have done, Mitt Romney has said climate change is real. We won't talk about Mike Lee, folks, you know the Utah politics. But this, you'll see there's a picture here of the mayor of Salt Lake City, Mayor Biskupski, unveiling some of their charging stations as they continue to push for electric vehicles, and they're going to continue to expand the light rail, which they put in place for the 2002 Olympics, which came to Salt Lake City. So these are some of the things that Path to Positive is doing, that Eco-America is doing on the ground in our cities, where the rubber meets the road, local communities that everyone can have influence over, that everyone works in. All politics is local, but as I reminded folks when I was mayor, not all authority is local. So you still have to partner with state and federal governments, but starting with your mayors, your community leaders, your local faith and health leaders can be a great way to bring people together. So if you remember one thing about communities, we're the connectors. We're connecting. And we're going to hear from folks today about how they've connected and some really exciting things going on in our cities and communities. So now I am going to introduce our moderator, who is also one of our partners with Climate Resolve in Los Angeles. It's hard being the third panel. You've already heard all these great things talked about, but Los Angeles is doing amazing things, and Jonathan Parfrey has been part of that. He really is the embodiment of what we try to do at Eco-America, bringing sectors together, bringing different viewpoints together, because before founding Climate Resolve, Jonathan was a commissioner at the LA Department of Water and Power. He helped found the statewide alliance of regional collaboratives for climate adaptation. He served as the LA Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility, and he founded and directed the Orange County Catholic Worker. Not all at the same time. Different things. He also was appointed to Governor Schwarzenegger's environmental policy team in 2003. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Parfrey.
Thank you, Jennifer, and please stick around. We need you. We need you. Let's reflect on the difference between yesterday and today. Loved yesterday, but one of the interesting things about yesterday was it was very theoretical. And haven't today we've been hearing about action, about things that are happening on the ground. And that's what this panel is about. It's about things that are actually taking place in our cities that I think provides a sense of optimism that we can rally together to take action on climate change. In Southern California, let me just share a few statistics with you. Our local utility, Southern California Edison, is going to be at 80% carbon-free within the next 10 years. By law, they're supposed to only be 65%, but they're going to be at 80% carbon-free. On the way to 100% carbon-free, as the rabbi observed, in the year 2045, thanks to SB 100. And all utilities in every part of the California's industry is supposed to be carbon-free by 2045, according to executive order. But if you fly into Los Angeles, going into LAX, you can look down, you'll see nothing but city, you'll see big freeways. And so we do have a number of intractable problems, and they're real. Transportation emissions have actually been rising rather than declining. Our air pollution problem remains huge. The sprawl problem, if there's a spot of open land, someone's building a single-family home on it. And so, with the help of Eco-America, Climate Resolve has the Path to Positive Los Angeles program, spearheaded by a wonderful coworker, Christina von Hoffman, who's in this audience right now. And the work that we did is putting Angelenos in the climate picture, taking where they are, taking their expertise and rallying it to climate solutions. And one area that we worked on was forming a coalition called EnviroMetro. And that coalition helped pass something called Measure M, that Ms. DuPont Walker now gets to oversee the allocation of the billions of dollars that voters said, we want to deal with the transportation problem. We want to tax ourselves to deal with the air pollution problem. And so this Measure M is building new subways, new light rail, new rapid buses, new bike lanes in car-heavy Los Angeles. And so this is an exciting new area in Los Angeles. And some breaking news, just this last Monday, Mayor Garcetti announced his LA's Green New Deal, the new sustainability plan. So Los Angeles is a city of 4 million people, and by 2035, 100% of our wastewater will be recycled. 70% of our water that we use will come from local water. Currently, we import 90% of our water. We will be carbon-free, as I observed, by 2045, and in that process, create 400,000 new green jobs by 2050. One of the areas where Climate Resolve has really participated with the city is in preparing for the effects of extreme heat. And in this area, we have been the champions of cool roofs and cool streets. And so in Los Angeles today, there are a few miles, there are experiments of cool streets, of pavement that haven't been painted white. People use the word paint a little bit too liberally, but it's a treatment of a slurry seal on the asphalt that reflects the sun's energy bounces it back into space. It's a very small piece of geoengineering, perhaps, but it's a way where we cool down the city of Los Angeles and at the same time get at the heart of the climate problem. It's an experiment, and we hope to report back on that experiment. Now, Los Angeles County is 10 million people, and they've released what I think is one of the best sustainability plans out there, and we work with even a larger body called SCAG, wonderful name, Southern California Association of Governments, that oversees 18 million people. And our organization, which is guided by the work that Eco America has led us towards, is working on a resilience plan for the 18 million people in Southern California. So I just want to give you a flavor of what's happening in LA. And unlike Las Vegas, what happens in LA, I think, leaves LA. And we like that idea. But now I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panel that's here. First up, our currently elected official is Hattie Porteous-Jones, and she is a second-term council member of the city of Fairburn, Georgia, where she develops policy, enacts laws for the well-being of Fairburns, 14,000 citizens, and ensures the proper stewardship of its resources. She's on the national board of the National League of Cities and serves on their Legislative Action Committee and is also the chair of the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Policy Committee. Now we have Brendan Shane, who is the climate director for the Trust for Public Land, and he is charged with shaping the land protection programs there to protect communities from climate threats and reduce climate pollution. And I know Brendan from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network a few years ago, where Brendan was the Chief of Policy and Sustainability for the city that you're now in, for Washington, D.C., where he led the efforts across agencies and the community to develop Sustainable D.C., the city's first comprehensive sustainability program. And maybe you could talk about the new Resilient Washington plan that just got released as well. That's right. And now we also have Lori Tremmel Freeman, and she's the executive officer of the National Association of County and City Health Officials. And prior to joining NACCHO, that is their name, Freeman served as the CEO of the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs. And last but not least, and you know her already, Jennifer Watson Roberts, who is the director of the Path to Positive Communities program at Eco America. And as you've heard, she is the 58th mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, where she signed the mayor's climate pledge and became part of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And Jennifer is also the proud recipient of the Maya Angelou Women Who Lead Award and Equity North Carolina's Ally of the Year Award. And now, Councilmember Porteous-Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And thank you, Eco America, for inviting me to serve on this panel. I have learned so much in the past 24 to 36 hours. I have taken copious notes, a lot to take back to my community. I got involved in this work, quite frankly, by accident. My issue was about quality of life. My community is South Suburban Atlanta. We are about 25 miles outside of the city of Atlanta, but we serve in the same county as the city of Atlanta. You said that my population was 14,000. I just saw a document the other day that we are a little over 15,000, and we're counting. We're hoping that when the census is done, we will be officially over the 15,000 mark. But when my husband and I moved to the community, it's a community that was about 140-something years old, but not a substantially growing community. Lots of trees, lots of wooded areas, places I could walk with my dog, very little traffic. But we had this premier park that I just absolutely love. And some issues arose relative to the park that really piqued my interest as to what was going on. But at the same time, a new subdivision was being planned. I saw the subdivision. I saw them working behind the trees. And then about 2 or 3 days later, I saw that every tree had been decimated. I had a problem with that. So I went directly to City Hall, talked to my council member, one in particular, and to the governing body at large to say that I thought that that was a major problem. Trees have major value. I didn't know the environmental value. I was thinking economically and real estate values. I was thinking about quality of life in my community. So trees became my issue. And that's how I got involved in this issue. Fast forward, I decided to run for elected office, and it was because of the park that I had mentioned earlier to run for office. All the ways I always talked about quality of life. Good quality of life and health, as we've learned, if we've got lots of trees. Good quality of life, as we've learned, if we have green space. Good quality of life, as we have learned, if we are an active community. Good quality of life, as we have learned, if we establish policies that ensures and guarantee that we have good quality of life. So one of those major legislations was a tree ordinance that the city of Fairburn passed. It's not a normal tree ordinance. Ours is very stringent because we wanted to maintain the tree canopy in our communities. We wanted to maintain the legacy of those trees, and we wanted to maintain the quality of life of the high real estate. So that began the work in terms of establishing policy and learning more about climate change, what that means to my community. And just because I am a community of, at the time, 13,000 or less, or now 15,000 or more, doesn't mean that we can't have an impact and do the same thing that my big sister, Atlanta, does. So I began watching what they did relative to the whole climate issue and started having conversations about that. I will just close with saying, how many of you have been to your city council meetings? Wonderful. How many of you have educated your council members about this issue on climate change? Wonderful. How many of you have taken people with you to discuss this issue on climate change? The numbers are less. And that's my challenge and my charge to you, is that you show up, that you speak up, because we, one, need to be educated about this issue, and two, we need to know that you care, and three, when you show up in mass, we pay attention. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's really exciting, actually, to be able to follow the councilwoman. I could almost take my couple of minutes and just say ditto, but I will provide some examples because you and many of the conversations here today are just really inspirational in terms of the creativity, the innovation, and in particular, the focus on building community as the path forward to deal with climate. So I'm with the Trust for Public Land, and our mission is to create parks and protect land for people. And to build on your theme, that's to ensure healthy and livable communities for generations to come. We heard yesterday in the Breakthroughs for Nature about one critical element of nature, right? This is literally God's creation, to the invention to capture carbon, and it needs to be part of the climate solution in a much more significant and massive way. We need to have forests, we need to have greenery on a national, and a community and a national and global scale to help deal with greenhouse gas emissions. At this point, though, there's enough damage done that the heat is coming, the storms are coming, the fires are coming, the water levels will rise, and greening is necessary. Bringing nature back into our communities is critical to protect us. So it helps us cut down greenhouse gas emissions and lock them up for the future, but it can play and must play a much more important role in protecting the communities we live in, particularly those communities that are most at risk, hit first, hit hardest, low-income, communities of color, disenfranchised. So I'm going to talk about a simple breakthrough solution, which is build more parks. And why, you may ask? Well, to the physical reasons to do that, as you mentioned, the environmental benefits. As storms grow more intense, parks can protect people from floodwaters. And so not far from Fairburn, in Vine City neighborhood in West Atlanta, it's a historically impoverished community, and they faced, they're a low-lying community that has consistently been flooded. In 2002, it reached really critical conditions with flash floods that destroyed dozens of homes, damaged hundreds of others, and people were being pulled out windows to be rescued in the city of Atlanta. There are a bunch of ways to deal with that type of issue, but in this case, they chose to build a park as a solution. So this summer, for those of you here nearby, you should go see Cook Park, a brand new 16-acre, state-of-the-art city park that provides really badly needed green space access for everyone, but at the same time, it's specially engineered to capture and filter millions of gallons of stormwater to reduce the risk of flooding for that community going forward for generations to come. Parks also play a critical role in cooling as the summer heat grows. So in Philadelphia, some of our colleagues from the Philadelphia team are here. There's great examples in a schoolyard program, and one example is the William Dick Elementary School. Many of you may know Philadelphia is our largest and poorest community in America, so 25% of the people there live in poverty. And you see that in the condition of parks, you see that in the condition of schoolyards. So at this particular school, it was an asphalt lot, which you see in many communities still today. And on that lot, the surface temperature would consistently, routinely be 115 degrees or more. So not an ideal place for the kids to play, not a healthy place for the kids to play, and not a community asset. So our team in Philadelphia, working with the school, the kids, the teachers, and community members, most from the entire surrounding community, created a water-smart playground and a green space that stays cooler on hotter days and actually then captures stormwater and creates a community amenity and a safe place to play. They also took a park, an asphalt lot that was fenced, and turned it into a green space that was open. And so that created access for 14,000 people that live in the half mile around that park, essentially a new community park that becomes a place that they can use every single day. And so I wanted to just take 1 minute to talk about the social side of that, because it really can't be overstated. This isn't just about creating the space, it's about how you create the space and the fact that parks are a convening space. That's where communities come together. And so to the extent we want to move toward bringing different people together, setting new policies, building new movements, you have to have a place to do that. And the park in the community can be that place.
Mm-hmm. You next.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So, it's NACHO, by the way. We like to think about public health in terms of, not in terms of nachos. So, NACHO. But we get it a lot, so no worries. But across the country, our local health departments, and there are about 3,000 of them, are really tasked every day with addressing the many health risks and outcomes that stem from climate change. And these communities are really susceptible, as you probably learned a lot about yesterday, to increased exposure to in geographic reach of vector-borne diseases like Zika and Lyme disease, exacerbation of respiratory illness due to worsening air quality and pollution levels rising and food shortages and all kinds of other issues associated with climate change. Similarly, we are dealing a lot with preparedness and response activities associated with increased frequency and intensity and adversity of weather events, floods and wildfires and hurricanes and other public health threats to communities bring about a whole nother host of public health issues like waterborne disease and heat-related illnesses and displacement and mental health. Local health departments really work on the front lines with their communities to identify and mitigate disproportionate exposures to environmental health hazards. They ensure non-discriminatory compliance with environmental health and safety laws, and they also work to assure that there's proper siting of hazardous facilities, adequate payment for hazardous waste cleanup, and fair land use laws and policies assure that they are in place in communities. According to the U.S. Global Change Research Program Climate Health Assessment, and this is a quote, every American is vulnerable to the health impacts associated with climate change. Everyone, all of us. Some, of course, face greater risks, and the health impacts of climate change, we know, disproportionately affect already vulnerable and at-risk populations. In terms of environmental health and policy, this is an area where our local health departments work within their communities, and we have the ability to increase awareness among decision makers and other stakeholders about the environmental public health implications of policy decisions. And as citizens of our own communities, I like to think of it in terms of not us versus them, but we are them. We are part of our community, and we have the same advantage and ability to motivate others to get engaged in their community meetings, to represent themselves at the table, to protect themselves against some of these hazards. We know that in terms of environmental justice, the fundamental prerequisites for population health are peace and shelter and education, food income, a stable ecosystem, sustainable resources, social justice, and equity. Vulnerable populations that are most affected by environmental hazards through inequitable policies include pregnant women, children, racial and ethnic minorities, the elderly, and the disabled. So it's a broad group. It's not just racial, although that's a very, very important part of it, but it also includes all kinds of other folks in the community that are at risk. I also wanted to mention that immigrants and refugees are emerging populations of concern because they have limited choices of where they work and they live, and they also are more susceptible to other disease like asthma and high blood pressure, lead exposure and obesity. Up to 200 million climate refugees are expected to be displaced by 2050, and this represents another disproportionately burdened community by environmental strains on their livelihood and poor health outcomes. And then finally, just to sort of close out, I do have a good example from a local health department who's working in the state of California to actually educate their community on what they can do to make an impact in San Luis Obispo. They have created a campaign to educate the community about the health impacts of climate change and spur them to action. Their program is called We Take Health and Climate Change Personally. And this program includes a lot of different aspects of education and engagement with the community. But they have some really good resources, one of which is the journey of an apple, which is meant to show even children at the youngest age what it means to eat an apple from a local farmer's market and where it travels less than 10 miles to get into your hands versus an apple that takes 2,000 miles to get to a grocery store and go through a lot of different processes, including all kinds of changing of the apple's original nature to get into the hands of the folks that eat it. And so there are good things happening in our local health departments. I'm happy to share other examples of this with you too. Thank you.
So once again, batting cleanup. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories. Something you may not have thought about was cities and what cities are dealing with climate change. I'm from North Carolina. North Carolina got hit by Hurricane Florence about 6-7 months ago. We're still dealing with the impacts. The cameras go away, the news crews go away, people whose lives have been devastated and ruined are there to try to pick up the pieces. We've been trying to get FEMA money, we've been trying to get state money. It's never enough. The latest grant that I saw the governor applied for was a mental health grant of $11 million because families are still traumatized. And this was the hurricane that sat for 4 days and poured buckets and buckets and buckets. And a week after the wind and the storm had left, the flooding was still rising. That's how much water was in eastern North Carolina. A third of our counties, we have 100 counties, a third of them disaster areas. There's still $2 billion of damage to schools in the area. So kids are going to school with mold in the walls. And as you can imagine, a lot of these schools, because it's a rural part of North Carolina, a lot of these are low-income communities. These are rural communities, these are small towns. When the cameras go away, people forget. And this is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the equity piece of climate and climate justice, but also about bringing communities in to prepare and to be ready, and the climate refugees and the people who cannot find work again, the people who cannot afford to move, what happens to them? And something that you might not have thought about, I was sitting down with the head of, we have the North Carolina League of Municipalities, which is kind of like the National League of Cities for our state. National League of Cities is our partner here. So I said, what are you most concerned about with the cities and towns in North Carolina and dealing with the climate crisis, climate change? He told me that there are as many as 100 cities in North Carolina that will disappear in the next 5 years. And the reason, they're not going to just float away, the people will stay, but the cities will unincorporate, possibly. We hope not. But this is the thing he worries about, because they don't have the money to rebuild their stormwater systems or their water systems or their police and fire. They don't have the tax base, right? These flooded properties are losing value. So people aren't employed, they're not paying sales tax, they're not paying income tax. So pretty soon, that city recognizes we can't survive. Last year, 2 cities in North Carolina went away. The city councils had to go home. The mayor went home, city staff was fired. They put all their services onto the county. And the counties in North Carolina are thinking about this as well. You know, how are we going to take on this additional burden? What is going to happen if all these cities can no longer survive as entities? And this is the first time that I had heard this real, you talk about justice and equity and electoral influence and ability to have a voice and the local support for services, and how near and urgent this is in North Carolina. And this is a state that passed a wind moratorium. Our legislature passed a moratorium, we couldn't do any wind. They also passed a law about 4 years ago that said you cannot use science in planning on the coast. You're not allowed to use climate science. Like in a law, they said that. So So that's the challenge that we're working with in communities. Okay, I have 1 second to tell my second story. My second story is one of hope. My friend Greg Stanton, who was mayor of Phoenix and now is a congressman from Arizona, tells this great story about how there are breakthroughs. There are things that can help your folks recognize there are solutions that benefit everyone. He was trying to expand the transit system in Phoenix, and he recognized that Mesa, Arizona, very conservative suburb of Phoenix, they had to go through Mesa to make the transit system work, because we know these things are better when they work regionally, when they bring in more people and they have more miles they cover. So he was trying to figure out, how am I going to get the Mesa residents to vote for this transit bond? Well, Governor Mike Leavitt in Utah, Republican governor, had been there when they expanded the transit system for the Olympics in 2002. So he invited Governor Leavitt to come and speak at a conference in Phoenix to talk about how you can be a conservative and support transit, and you know what? It works, and it's really good for everybody. And so after that conference, the residents of Mesa, who were part of this conference and started talking, et cetera, ended up voting for the transit bond. Bond passed, the rail was built, and now the residents of Mesa are some of the biggest users of the transit system. So there you go, bipartisan collaboration. When it's a win-win, when people see the value, that can work as well. Let's hope we can do that in North Carolina. Thanks.
So in the few minutes we have left, I wanted to ask the panel one question before we turn it over to the audience. And the question is, there are other intractable problems that you're facing at the local level. In Los Angeles, structural racism, lack of housing, smog, sprawl, transportation problems, inequity. These are really big issues, but they all have an intersection with the climate issue. And I would like you to perhaps opine for us on how those intersections can be helpful or harmful within your own local government. So, council member, please.
Well, you can't talk about one without the other. Just recently, a proposal was brought before council regarding a development, apartment complex for our downtown area, which, you know, we have a plan. We want to build density downtown, but the location that was being proposed had a huge impact on legacy communities surrounding it, increased traffic regarding that. Affordability of the units was an issue, and the whole quality of life regarding it. But because of all those challenges, and even though we want density downtown, the council unanimously denied that particular project. And so those are kind of the hard decisions that we have to make, and competing decisions as well. And I'll just add one other thing. When I came on council, I encouraged my colleagues. I said, we need to do a rebranding, because I had heard from citizens as I was out campaigning, talking about they wanted Fairburn to be a new city, a progressive city, and that we didn't have the feel and look of that. And so we did the rebranding, and overwhelmingly everyone said, we want Fairburn to be progressive, but we want to maintain that small town quality of life feel. So that is our everyday challenge, and that is the question we have to ask ourselves for every decision that we have to make. So they are competing interests, and we have to take all of those into consideration, but sometimes, we don't get what we want at the time, but that doesn't mean we don't reassess and reevaluate and see how we can address that issue from another perspective.
If I may, how does this play out at the National League of Cities as well, these questions of other intractable problems with the climate issue?
Oh, very much so. The scenario, quite frankly, is very similar. Serving as the chair of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resource Committee, one of the issues that we are evaluating and wanting to make some decision about advocating is what they call PFAS. It's a contaminant that's been around for over 40 years. It's used a lot in firefighting, but what I have found is that it is sort of in our everyday products, like toothpaste, like Scotchgard, and many things. But it is now showing up in our waterways. And we are collaborating with the Military Community Council to deal with this issue, and we will be having conversations with Community and Economic Development. So all of them overlap, and it's an environmental issue, but it affects all of us.
Thank you. And Ms. Mayor, could you shed some light on climate and other intractable problems that you faced in Charlotte?
Well, I think, and it's interesting that you work with cities and counties, that Lori works with them, because I think one of the challenges is silos. We have local government, we have a school board, we have a city council, we have a county commission. So our city council passed the 100% clean renewable goal for 2030, but they didn't affect the school board, and they have 1,200 buses that are diesel buses that the kids are breathing the fumes from every day. And so that's the county and the state working to fund that. So we have all these silos, and at the same time, the county, which hadn't had an environment committee, reconstituted its environment committee. It hadn't had one since I left, which was 2012. But the city, after passing that great thing, disbanded its environment committee. So we have, it's kind of up, one, down, two. But I think the siloing of different government entities and the need for more, I know there are regional collaboratives that are forming that have great impact. I know you're doing that in California. Thank goodness. We have councils of government, but they don't have the authority and the funding. They really need to have the voice they need. So, I just encourage collaboration, the cross-sector, cross-jurisdiction, looking at regionalism, because Charlotte and, DC and all these places are, the city is small, Atlanta is 400,000, but the metro area is millions. And they all use the same transportation, they all breathe the same air, they have the same storms. And so we need to get better at connecting. I remember I said connecting. We need to get better at connecting in non-traditional circles and engaging more deeply and recognizing that you're serving the same community. And so, let's get more organizations like NACCHO, did I say it right?
Yes.
That involves cities and counties, and get them at the same table. The built environment is really important, but counties are doing public health. Those things have to be housing. That's so important. That's all connected.
Thank you for bringing up climate collaboratives. We do have one in Los Angeles. It's called LARC, LA Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability. It's a long name. But we have the major institutions in Los Angeles talking about climate together and doing some of that common planning. And in our audience tonight, we have Kate Meese from the Local Government Commission. Yes. And Kate is the executive director of Local Government Commission that oversees the Sacramento Climate Collaborative, as well as the statewide collaborative of the collaboratives, where there's shared learning among the various collaboratives. So it is possible to get out of those silos and develop joint plans. And I'm happy to report the LA County Sustainability Plan and the LA City Sustainability Plan is beautifully integrated, as well as the state one. So we work often with the governor's office to integrate all this planning as well. So, Brendan, could you reflect on intractable problems?
Well, and maybe just to build on what you're just saying, I think that one of the most exciting things about this effort in Eco America and the discussion we've had about moving across constituencies and sectors, the comments earlier about congregations are people who vote. And the kind of silos, that is like the big problem often for people. Money and silos, probably a couple of big problems. But one of the ways those get broken down is when the different community members come knock on the door of the local leaders and say, this is what we want. We want you to work together. We want We want more green space, we want to protect a particular issue, or we want better transportation. And so I think that finding an issue where people can come together and mobilizing these different constituencies with the moral authority they have, with the expertise they have, is probably one of the best solutions to helping break through this.
That's great. Ms. Freeman.
Not much more to add, probably just that there's opportunity always to we know there's always less money, but there's a lot of duplication of effort too, and there's a lot of opportunity to leverage the way we work together in different ways for better outcomes. And I think whether you're a member of a community, a business partner, local government, what have you, you need to see yourself in where you fit into the problem and the solution. And then there are ways to convene partners and come together for these solutions and leverage all these efforts.
Thank you. I just want to leave a phrase out there for if we wonder where we can get resources on climate adaptation. There's a thing called local hazard mitigation plans. And if your local hazard mitigation plan could be dedicated to dealing with some of the effects of climate change, you can receive some funding from FEMA, granted if your state agency, emergency services agency, allows that to flow through to the local municipality. But there are funds that are on the table now that are currently not being accessed. So local hazard mitigation plans can be a vehicle. Get wonky, get in it, go get that money, and you can help your community today. Questions from the audience, please. Yes, you there. Yes, you. Thank you.
We have microphones. Woohoo.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Megan Miller, and I've got a background in anthropology. I'm going to read because my heart is beating really fast, so I'm going to lose myself.
Go for it.
I've got a background in anthropology, psychology, biology, now studying dietetics at the University of the District of Columbia, and just still not getting enough from one program. So I'm increasingly involved in urban sustainability there. We have a farm stand in a food desert in Ward 8, just like a lot of people are doing. So come on by. My question is for Jonathan Parfrey. Am I saying that right?
Sure.
Say it right. How do I say it?
Or call me Nacho.
Nacho. So Nacho, let's be honest, LA is a popular kid, just like New York, just like San Francisco, just like Miami. You guys are popular kids. So what you say is important because people follow. We're like sheep. And that's a benefit in this sense because we have a lot of information that we want to share. So, what do you do? What you do is important. How closely do the LA's Green New Deal goals acknowledge and align with the criticality of what Jonathan Foley, where are you? Brett Kugelmass, where are you? Joseph Rum, where are you? And others have described. Yes, integrated on local, state, and federal levels, great, love it. I appreciate LA's leadership, but in what has since been described today, I am not yet convinced that LA's goals break through. Would you please be more specific so that I may be more helpful about LA's thought leadership impact and be able to share that and be excited about it? If not, could you please, number one, for specificity, provide resources to close my ignorance gap? And number two, transparency. Acknowledge others who are your peers who are doing a more exacting job in addressing the criticality.
Okay, thanks. So that's a lot. Maybe we could take this offline. But I think the goal that has been articulated by Green New Deal here in DC has been to get to 100% renewables within 10 years. And what I described in Southern California was getting to 80% by that same date. And there is an acknowledgement that I would like to get it to 100%, but if one takes a view of the rest of the country, those other places aren't even close. My understanding of West Virginia is that it's 96% coal today. And so to get to even 20% renewables in a state like that is a huge leap. I think Los Angeles is setting a nice bar. I think California is setting a nice bar. It's the role of advocates, and I'm not representing the government, we're an advocacy organization, is to push them for more and sooner, but with the recognition that we also need to model how other states can move in this direction without deleteriously impacting their current society that they currently have. So this is something that we're trying to work on. Love to take it offline. Another question.
Hi. Oh, okay. I'm Shannon with Sustain Charlotte in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have the pleasure of working closely with Jennifer for many years. I had a couple of different questions, but I'll try to just pick one here. So we have, as the mayor mentioned, a new climate sort of plan at a very high level. But of course, putting together a plan is sort of the easy part. Implementation's the hard part. And as she also mentioned, we have a lot of siloization with city and county. And Brendan, since you're up there, and you probably know Charlotte's park system is ranked in your ranking at the bottom of the 100 cities that you rank. So we have the worst park system in the country, worst economic mobility. We have our challenges, but I'm curious about how we can implement. If you have ideas for implementation of those climate policies, or cities who you've seen do a really good job of implementing those plans, particularly when you have this divided government. The county, Mecklenburg County that Charlotte sits in, has the park department. The city doesn't have a park department. So that's another example of the siloization of government. It's a real challenge how we can improve our park score, the Trust for Public Land park score in Charlotte, given the city doesn't build parks but does all the land planning. So anyway, lots of different things in there, but just any ideas or models on how cities that have done a really good job of implementing their climate plans and sort of what the keys to success were. Thank you.
Well, there's a bunch there too. I think it comes back to the big picture of, the more people, the more voices coming from more parts of the community that are taking those concerns about the lack of pace, the fact that our parks are at this level, why aren't we at this level? We can see better models around the country. That advocacy is, and I think that's in part what you guys are doing, right? But building that up and reaching out and building a broader coalition is critical. But I think, obviously we're focused on parks, trails, community forests, things that are green. But I think that those and similar projects, maybe it's, community solar or other things that people can touch and feel and do now. I think it's critical that when you go, when you take concerns to local leaders or others, that you be specific about, we want to do this today. So we have now about 250 mayors that have made a commitment to join a 10-minute walk campaign. That means they want to get a park within a 10-minute walk of everyone in their community. And it's a pledge, but you ask them to take the pledge and then you say, where's your first park going to be? Or from an emissions perspective, they make a climate pledge and you say, where's your first community solar installation going to be? And something that is physical and real, and in addition to the long-term goals, gets people focused and motivated around, the exciting opportunities there are.
Thank you.
It's not a panacea, but it's a suggestion.
We are out of time.
Are we out of time?
We are out of time because we really respect you guys and we know you're hungry and we have a little bit more programming to do.
Tiny more program to go. So let's join in thanking this amazing panel, which I'm part of.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
so much. Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
So now we're going to move into the Climate Leadership Awards. I want to thank our communities folks for really grounding us in what we need to think about locally as we move into our working session this afternoon, where it's all about local cross-sector climate action. But first, let's really recognize some leaders in the room.
And before we do that, Megan, we would like to tell and express our generosity for the CRESG Foundation. Because of their generous support, we had the opportunity to give scholarships to almost more than 20 people that had the opportunity to be here in this conference and learn all this valuable information and take it back to their communities. And it's important to say that they won these scholarships because of their climate leadership and inclusion and diversity in the movement. So let's give a round of applause for all of them that are here because of the Crazy Foundation.
Yeah, thank you for making your trip here and being with us. And as we move into the Climate Leadership Awards, I just want to recognize that so many of you in the audience are doing a lot to lead on this issue. You're advocating locally, regionally, nationally. You're taking steps in your own organization to walk the walk, be more sustainable, even commit to have zero impact. And I want to thank you for all that you do to lead on this issue. What we're doing today is recognizing several organizations that we work with that have made a commitment to visibly lead on climate and to go to 100% clean by 2030. So while we might not have that kind of commitment nationally, they're doing what they can in their own organizations, and they're inspiring the thousands of members that they have to follow in their footsteps. So please welcome Jennifer Roberts, who's going to give the awards for our community.
These things are heavy. Okay, so our first award, we have 2 awards today on behalf of the community sector. Our first one is an interesting one. We've been working with Utah since 2016. You heard me talk a little bit about their successes. Salt Lake City joined Eco-America's Path to Positive, made a 100% renewable commitment. Since then, the state has passed 2 amazing climate bills, which we didn't think was possible. And these folks in Utah had a huge hand in that. Working through our Path to Positive program, they, one of these resolutions that was passed was the first climate resolution to pass in a conservative-leaning state. And I tried to give this to Utah Clean Energy, who is one of our main partners, and they came back and said, this is a team effort. So they really epitomize the collaboration. They said, Park City Mayor Bierman, Summit County Councilors Robeson and Wright, Salt Lake City, and Mayor Boskupski all worked hard to pass HB 411. They're Path to Positive Utah leaders. They're part of the Utah Climate Action Network and have worked with Utah Clean Energy. So this award has 5 things on it. And here to accept on behalf of these 5 entities, Ryan Anderson from Utah Clean Energy. Make your way to the stage. Here she is. On behalf of Utah Clean Energy, Utah Climate Action Network, Salt Lake City, Park City, and Summit County. Congratulations. You want to say a few words?
Hi, good afternoon. I am so incredibly grateful to be here today accepting this award on behalf of Utah Clean Energy, Salt Lake City, Park City, Summit County, and the Utah Climate Action Network. Passing HB 411, or the Community Renewable Energy Act, took incredible, tremendous collaboration and hard work, and we are so grateful to Eco-America for supporting Path to Positive Utah and helping us accelerate the climate conversation. Thank you.
All right. So you should figure out how you divide up between 5. They're going to figure out some good math because they have 2 awards for 5 entities. So it's like they can figure that out. Need some of our climate engineers to figure that out. So the next of our community awards goes to Climate Resolve in LA for climate leadership in the city of Los Angeles. You've heard a lot about them. Climate Resolve is dedicated to telling the local climate story, winning policy measures, and providing solutions to inspire Southern California to adapt and thrive in the face of climate change. They've been our partner for several years as well. You've heard about Mayor Garcetti's Green New Deal and their commitment to move to 100% zero carbon. What's also interesting about their commitment, and they have this in their statement, making that goal is really important. Even if it's a moonshot, Seeing where you're going means you're more likely to get there. And they included social equity, green jobs, community inclusion, and transparency in their commitment. They have more than 250 cross-sector leaders in the LA area and have helped pass a record-setting transit bond, the Cool Roof Initiative, and I'm sure they're part of the state of California's commitment to be 100% zero carbon by 2045. So here to accept the award, you've met him already, Jonathan Parfrey. All right, come say a few words.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I think of the climate movement as before Bob and after Bob. And so there was before Bob when Waxman Markey had just failed, thanks Lindsey Graham. And so there was this time where the movement was asking itself, what should we do? What can be done? And there was one person who was really thinking deeply, asking a lot of questions, and it was Bob Perkowitz. And I had the pleasure of hanging out with Bob at that time, and he influenced actually the formation of Climate Resolve, that we came up with a new way of being a local climate organization that was focused on making climate change relevant to the people where it's taking place. And thank you, Bob. This is maybe our organization is the post-Bob kind of organization. So it's with incredible gratitude that we've been able to work with Eco America. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, I get the wonderful privilege of awarding our wonderful faith partners who are making these kinds of commitments as well. And you've heard from one of them today already, so I'll start with John. So we are so excited to award the first 2019 Climate Leadership Award for one of our faith partners to the United Church of Christ, which again, as you heard from John earlier today, has been a historic leader on issues of environmental injustice and addressing the root causes of environmental racism. And now, thanks to really leadership from John and others like Jim Antal and the church, they are making a commitment to what Jim often refers to as the greatest moral imperative of our time, which is climate change. They have made creation care a top priority, as you heard, as part of their Three Great Loves initiative. They are publicly supporting and encouraging all clergy and congregations to support solutions like transition to 100% clean energy, and to talk about this regularly in their services and in their places of worship. So we're very grateful for their leadership, and I would like to invite John Dorhauer back up to the stage to receive this award. You're on my right.
I'll be brief. The United Church of Christ has been all in with Bob Perkowitz and Eco America from the start. And to be given this award by Eco America is something we are very proud of. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity and thank two individuals who are largely responsible for our collective commitments to eco-justice. The author of Climate Church, Climate World, and special advisor to the General Minister and President of the United Church of Christ on eco-justice, Jim Antal, and our Executive Minister for Environmental Justice in the United Church of Christ, Brooks Barrington. It is on their behalf that I received this award.
I'm going to have everyone take a seat while they receive their awards, and we'll take a picture afterwards. But the next organization that I want to recognize is the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church Western Episcopal District. We have had the pleasure of working with Bishop Staccato Powell as he embraces climate change as one of his top priorities as Bishop of the Western Episcopal District. We are so thankful for his leadership, and just this month, he has made a commitment to help the Western Episcopal District move all congregations toward 100% clean energy by 2030, which is incredibly bold and audacious commitment. So thank you so much, and I welcome you up to the stage to receive the next award.
On behalf of the Western Episcopal District and the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, unlike my great friend John, we weren't in from the start, but we are here now. Thank you, Bob, for your energy and your leadership. I am a native of North Carolina, and Mayor Roberts has already indicated the challenges that we've had in that state and the difficulties in California you're well aware of with the fires and the other natural causes as a result of our irresponsibility about the climate. So the Western District is delighted to be the face for the faceless and the voice for the voiceless as we tackle this, and we will win because God is on our side. Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to recognize the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, who in 2017, with leadership of several of their leaders and congregants and clergy from across the country, made a commitment, passed a resolution to go climate neutral by 2030 and climate positive, taking carbon out of the atmosphere by 2035. And they are working diligently to implement that program of support to help congregations move in that direction as we speak. They are boldly leading in this field. Other denominations are looking to them to see how this can be implemented. And it's being led in part by the Green Chalice program of Christian Church Disciples of Christ and Reverend Sotelo Long, who I'd like to invite to the stage to accept the award.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank God for this opportunity to say how much I appreciate being introduced and a part of this wonderful movement. I came new to this opportunity by virtue of my position. I was clueless, but got called to be president of Disciples Home Missions, and our denomination had been fully engaged in this, and I went on a high learning curve. So I want to also make sure I thank Blessed Tomorrow and the leadership of Anita Cruz, Megan Spicer, the director of Eco America, Bob Perkowitz, the president, along with his prime motivator behind the scenes, Lisa, and also for our wonderful co-moderator today, Vanessa Hauk, for her being a part of the board and everything. I also want to say on behalf of our general minister and president, Terry Hoard Owens, she gave the green light to make sure that we're engaged in this. And there's so many issues that come our way, but we're making sure that we stay tight and rightly connected with the work around climate initiatives. And my colleague in ministry, John Dohauer, I want to say we really connected in a special way because we have a real intentional bond between the United Church of Christ and the Disciples of Christ as far as recognizing our mutual standing in ministry and all of that. And I'm going into that as well. I'll be at their General Synod in June, so I'll see you there. Your General Assembly in July? All right. And my brother from another mother, Sotelo. We kind of kid like that. We hit it off from previous Eco America events, and his heart is true to this commitment. So I want to say it's always good to be a part of this with you. I want to make sure that I finally say that Green Chalice, led by Carol Devine and Scott Hardneri, are the prime movers and shakers in the midst of the Disciples of Christ, making sure that they're giving feet and life and witness to this, even to the point that at our General Assembly, before we have it, there'll be a gathering of pastors and clergy for a resiliency retreat to make sure that we try to drill down to make sure that the word gets out, not just to the higher-ups, but down to the pastors and to the congregations. And so we're committed to make sure that we put legs and feet behind this commitment. So with that, I also want to say that I'm so grateful to be a part of this work in collaboration with Creation Justice Ministries. You had a wonderful time of meditation or connecting with Shanta Reddy Alonzo this morning. Amen? For those who were here for that, we work hand in hand together as well. And last but not least, I got to say thank God for my wife, Dee, releasing me to be here for a couple of days, and for my parents, my father who's in heaven now, and my mother who's at home. She'd be proud to see her little boy obeying what she had taught me way back in the day. And let me just share this little tidbit that sort of connects with this. So give me a moment. I think I lost my section here, so pause. Here it is. There we go. As a faith leader, I'm fully persuaded that connecting people with the life-changing love of God encompasses care for creation and our home called Earth. I appreciate a clean home with fresh air and beautiful skies, not only for me, but for posterity. I'm glad that the disciples spearheaded by Green Chalice are collaborating with Blessed Tomorrow, Eco America partners in pursuit of healthy climate initiatives. ACLS 19 encourages eco-friendly living and challenges disastrous eco-friendly lifestyles. The ACLS community engages a coalition of sectors in spotlighting climate messes in order to seek safe and sound climate solutions. Put simply, like my mama told me as a young child, when I made a mess, don't leave it, clean it up. Let the church say amen.
Good afternoon. Did everybody go to sleep? Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Rear, the Senior Program Manager for Climate for Health here at Eco America. Thank you to our leaders in local government and faith institutions. It is now my honor to recognize our Climate for Health partners who are leading on clean energy. In the same way we are talking about climate change as a health emergency, we also have to help health professionals and people everywhere make the climate, energy, health connections. All of today's recipients have signed our Climate for Health 100% Clean Energy Declaration. Their visible national leadership on clean energy is helping the health sector understand and prioritize what otherwise might be a wonky subject, clean energy as a health solution. For our first recipient, with the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, we convene the Nursing Collaborative on Climate Change and Health. Through their leadership on clean energy, Annie is inspiring nurses everywhere to take similar action. Thank you, Katie Huffling, Annie's Executive Director, who is accepting this award for Annie.
Hi, good afternoon. It's such an honor to receive this award. The Alliance has made a very strong commitment that we, as a nursing organization, working with nurses who are on the front lines, seeing people every day who are being impacted by climate change, that we have to walk the walk. You know, no matter the size of your organization, from the smallest to the largest, we can all be doing our part and looking organizationally at our energy usage. And so even though we're a small organization, we've made a very strong commitment, and we're working with our other nursing organization collaborators to do the same. So thank you.
The American Public Health Association is working to create the healthiest nation by 2030, which means acknowledging that nearly every decision made in the public sphere, from federal clean air regulations to local sidewalk zoning, has an impact on people's health. Clean energy goals align perfectly with this platform. Thank you, Dr. Georges Benjamin, APHA's Executive Director, who is accepting this award for APHA.
Got 3 grandkids. So this work's important for us to be able to walk the talk. But I'm really accepting this award for my grandkids and yours. Thank you.
I know I'm biased, but health leaders are just the best. Members of the National Environmental Health Association include first responders and members of local environmental health teams who are on the ground for weeks and months after disasters occur. They help communities clean up, rebuild, and cope. Through their work on clean energy, NEHA is also working to mitigate climate change as well as adapt and respond. Thank you, Dr. Natasha DeJarnette, who's accepting this award for NEHA.
Thank you so much for this kind honor. We certainly thank Eco America and Bob and Megan. We thank Climate for Health with Layla and Rebecca for their leadership and also providing us a roadmap to be able to achieve this great task. We take this on as both a responsibility and with pride that we, one, educate and provide tools for the environmental health workforce to be there on the front lines addressing climate change and health. And then also as a responsibility that we have to walk the talk when it comes to climate and health. So on behalf of our board, who I will say voted unanimously in support of this effort, also on behalf of our executive director, Dr. David Dijak, which you saw earlier today, the staff at NEHA, and our nearly 6,000 members, I thank you, and we're happy to take this charge.
Physicians for Social Responsibility has 23 chapters throughout the country and students everywhere. Their leadership on clean energy will mobilize doctors to make changes in their offices and practices and talk to their patients and communities about changes they can make. Thank you, Barbara Gottlieb, who is accepting this award for PSR.
Thank you so much to Eco America. Physicians for Social Responsibility is really pleased and proud to be here today because the physicians are in the room and the physicians are in the community. I'd also like to add that PSR encompasses all types of health professionals. We're not just physicians. And we're totally committed to greening our practice, renewable energy, and I'd like to add that we're also training and engaging health professionals to take action on policy, the biggest lever for the change that we need to meet the frightening challenges of today. So renewable energy, fighting fossil fuels, rolling back fracking, we're there, and we're so happy to be doing it with Eco America. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, congratulations. Well, thank you so much, and I think it's really inspiring to see how each one of us from the place that we are can do something to be leaders in this issue, following our passion and finding a path to climate leadership in a way that is aligned with our values, with our beliefs and our abilities. So we can, each one of us from the place that we are, contribute. Now we're going to hear from a wonderful woman. She is a powerful voice in policy in Washington, in the national level also, and a great advocate for sustainability. Gina McCarthy was the ex-EPA administrator under the government of Barack Obama, and she could not be here with us today. She wanted to come, but she sent us a video, so let's hear from Gina.
Hello. Sorry I couldn't join you, but I am so happy to have a chance to connect. I'm Gina McCarthy, and I run Sea Change, a new center at Harvard THTN School of Public Health. And you may remember me as the former administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. You know, the one who knew that my job was to protect public health, the one who paid attention to science, who followed the law, and knew who they work for. The people in this country who deserve a clean, healthy, just, and sustainable world. I want to thank EcoAmerica for bringing so many faith, health, and community leaders together who care about our children and who care about our future. What an incredible opportunity to learn from and to lift up one another by embracing our personal obligation as well as our collective moral responsibility to take action on climate. Climate change at its heart is all about pollution, the carbon pollution that fuels climate change. And as we all know, carbon pollution is like all other pollutants. It is not an equal opportunity killer. It goes after the old and the young, minorities, and all those who struggle to make ends meet. And this week, it's really important that we recommit ourselves to stop pollution that impacts our health today and threatens to rob our children's future. And we draw on hope and energy from the fact that we have come a long way since the first Earth Day. We know that 16% of premature deaths across the world are the result of exposure to pollution. That's 9 million human beings. That's 3 times more than those who die from tuberculosis, malaria, and AIDS combined. This is serious business, and we are exposing our youngest children to the worst hazards. 1 in 4 kids under the age of 5 are dying because of causes related to an unhealthy environment. 1 out of 4 little kids. And a study just came out that shows that 4 million kids each year develop asthma simply as a result of the unfortunate instance that their families live near major highways. No child should struggle to breathe, and no mother should face their child not being able to breathe because of the problems associated with where they live, because of air pollution. We cannot tolerate these inequities any longer, certainly not the ones that threaten our kids' future. I am done talking about the realities we are facing and the threats to our children that they face tomorrow. And you should be too. It's time to stop talking and it's time to act. No mother, father, daughter, or son can sit on the sidelines and fail to engage. Climate change is the most significant public health, economic challenge, safety challenge, and national security challenge of our time. We are facing this together, and we have to act today. Let me be very clear. If we think about actions to fight climate change as opportunities to invest in public health, we will make our world healthier and more just today, while we create a path towards a future we can be proud to handle to our children. So that's what we need to do together, and that's what we need to speak up and talk about together. The good news we have is we have solutions to shift away from carbon pollution and move towards clean energy and cleaner communities. I ask each of you to find a way to make climate change personal for you and for everyone you have the opportunity to speak to. Get people to understand that it's not about polar bears and it's not about glaciers. It's about them. It's about their children, their grandchildren, and the future that we hold in our hands for them. If you're a parent, yours is the most precious hands and most precious voice that we can bring to this fight for our health and our children's future, because you will remember the first time you held your child in your arms. It's unforgettable. I myself was amazed that I could be so in love with this tiny person that I had never even met before. But I was also terrified because I knew for the first time, right then and there, that my future and my happiness depended on the health and happiness of that tiny little son that I had. No longer was my world all about me. My happiness was now inextricably linked to the health and happiness of my child. If my son or daughter wasn't healthy or happy, then my whole world, I knew right then and there when Dan was born, it would just fall apart. This is exactly what we need climate change to be all about for each and every one of us.
She's definitely a powerhouse and a wonderful voice and a role model to follow. So with this, we are going to move into our working session, and we're ready to hear about your ideas and the ways that we can collaborate together to make progress.
So today's working session works a lot like yesterday in the sense that you get to walk into the room. This time it's just upstairs in the pavilion on the second floor, and pick a table that most interests you. Today is all about local cross-sector climate advocacy. So thinking about it from a regional perspective. We'll have several tables dedicated to each of these regions. And you can see the 7 regions here.
And it's going to be like a working lunch. So we go there, you take your lunch, and then choose a table, and we'll start moving forward the way that we did yesterday.
And we really encourage you to connect with each other, change business cards, to really think through this exercise as something that you're birthing collaboration together with the people at that table.
And I think it's wonderful, Megan, how we have seen many of the recipients of the awards, how they are creating conference after conference, a family, you know, a bond, a sisterhood and a brotherhood among all of us. We all have so many things in common. I know what Gina McCarthy was saying, we all want the well-being of our family, the happiness of our children. We all want the same things, and it's better when we work together.
Absolutely. So let's go upstairs, second floor pavilion, grab your lunch, and we'll get started in about 20 minutes. Thank you. I also want to say goodbye to our live streamers. Thank you for being with us for a day and a half. We'll see you later. Thank you.